Hey guys, I'm Mike Wehner, and welcome to part 2 of the audiobook presentation of my novel, my debut novel, The Girl Who Can Cook. It's a psychological thriller about a man who goes to work in the restaurant of the woman who killed his best friend. If you are looking for part 1, down in the description there's a link to part 1. There's also a link to the Amazon listing where you can purchase this in paperback and in ebook. And then there's also all of my social media links and a book blurb if you're not sure if you want to listen to this thing, because it is long. Total runtime's about 7 hours. This is a limited time engagement. These two videos, part 1 and part 2, will be up until June 20th, and then it's going to go into Audible for sale as an audiobook. So if you have any problems with the audio or you hear any issues with the audio, please let me know. Leave them in the comments below so I can get it edited before it gets uploaded to the exchange. So thank you very much for listening. I truly hope you enjoy it. Take care.
Chapter 18. The library conference room was empty and dark. Erin vanished inside to hit the lights. A pile of folding chairs was stacked on the corner, and the table was accented with empty styrofoam cups. "You promised not a word to anyone," Erin said. I nodded while I helped clean up. "I hope you don't think less of me after this. Sit over there and don't say anything." I found the best of the mismatched rolly chairs and rocketed myself around the space a few times. "Why are we here?" I said, using the wall for leverage to power myself to the other side of the room. "This is my group," she said. One of the overhead lights was giving out, and though the room was lit, the bulb on the far side of the room fluttered and gave off a buzz each time it strained. "You brought me to a book group?" "No. Now shut up and get over there," she pointed. "Hey, Jennifer." A middle-aged woman who looked like a mustard stain stood in the doorway. Her eyes went every direction but forward, like an abused cocker spaniel. Dread washed up upon my shore. A cascade of sullied people soon followed, most of them women save for one immense man in a floor-length skirt and XXL hockey jersey. Each took a seat around the long rectangular table with pensive faces. The whole collection looked worn and downtrodden. Erin sat at the head of the table and pulled a binder from her bag. On the cover was a sticker that looked like it belonged on a punk rock poster. It said, "Enough." "Welcome to this week's meeting. To anyone new, this is a support group for people extricating themselves or healing from toxic and abusive relationships. I see a few faces I don't recognize. Is everyone in the right place?" A ginger woman shot up with both arms wrapped around her purse and left the room spitting apologies. I felt the same way, but instead I swung myself right and left in the swivel chair. It squeaked with each change of direction. "I still see some new faces. If you're new, we only ask that you share your name. Anything beyond that is completely up to you. My name is Erin, and this is a peer-run group, so don't think of me as a leader. I'm more of a guide. Miss, would you please tell us your name?" The hockey man had a white-jacketed book underneath his legal pad. So did Jennifer. It looked like she was shilling her book instead of helping people. My hatred bottomed out. I squeezed on my earlobes as my face twitched with rage. The introduction started on the far side of the room and slithered towards me. I was the one who had enough. I was going to take her out after this charade. We'd go to the train station with the promise of soup and wait on the platform behind the yellow line. As the train neared, I'd slip and try and catch myself on Erin's shoulder with both my hands. She'd tumble onto the electrified track, and if that didn't destroy her, if she managed to survive me, then the oncoming train would surely be her end. Soon the whole room was looking at me as I glared off in a daydream. When I realized they wanted me to speak, I shot my look of derision towards Erin. She'd made me voyeur to those who were suffering. Real victims, and not someone like me who was secondhand hurt. "I'm Alex," I said. The group was sympathetic to the twitching corners of my face, and the bit of hair on my belly the tiny white shirt couldn't cover. I lowered my head at Erin like a ram who was defending his part of the mountain. Two others introduced themselves after me, giving only their names and looking back to the head of the table to move us along. Erin read a long introduction from the three-ring binder in a persona I wasn't used to. She spoke thick, articulate words that the damaged herd crowded around. Gone was the savageness of her everyday speech. Here she was sincere and emotional. I thought it was a dupe, but every few sentences she'd look up from the paper and into my eyes to make sure I was paying attention, and entreat me to believe the narrative she'd spun. Some of you know my story. Writing it down was part of the healing process for me. More importantly is this, being with those of you that have also been wronged. That's why I'm here. I'm here so all of you know that you are not alone, so that all of you have at least one ally in an uphill climb to happiness. We'll get there together, I promise. It's time for the circle of hope, where anyone who would like to share is free to do so, and today I'd like to go first. I was staring daggers right at her eyes when she raised them from her binder, the outer rims glistening with fear and sadness. I opened my ears, considering her speech as self-delivered last rites, parting words that were sure to send me over the edge. She started at the beginning, the day she met John.
With and Without You, page 1. There was a time when I thought of myself as a feminist, a time when I knew that men and women were equal in everything. I thought that with enough practice and hard work, I could do anything that a man could. I built my life around this notion. I studied chemistry and got good grades. I was a college athlete. Later, I found some success as a chef, which is a profession dominated by men. My entire life was confirmation we're all the same. I hate to break it to you, but we aren't. It was the hardest lesson I ever learned. The truth is so simple that I'm shocked I've never heard it said out loud. Women and men both think about it. It influences our psychology, but nobody ever comes out and says it. It's on the face of every girl who has ever been hit on by a stranger, or in a man's grin after his girlfriend slaps him on the arm when he's acting like a jerk. It's a foundational notion of our society. Maybe we're too ashamed to admit that on the most basic level, there is a massive difference between the sexes. The truth is that men and women aren't the same, not physically. We aren't a little different either. We're barely the same thing. Almost every man on earth could strangle me, could rape me, could beat me into the ground, and there would be no way I could stop him. It's not like I'm some prissy basic bitch. I was the kicker on my high school football team. I'm that girl. I was good, too. I don't mean a guy with a weapon. I mean a regular guy with regular hands. Don't believe me? Girls, go ask a guy to arm wrestle. Not some big meathead, but a malnourished vegan who plays a lot of video games. Let me know how that works out. We know it's true, but we never say it. That's the contract between men and women. You can kill me, but I can ruin your life with one accusation. It's a completely fucked up balance of power, and it influences all of us, all the time. When I'm laughing and playing along with some guy who's hitting on me at the grocery store, he never seems to notice the nervousness in my voice. How uncomfortable I am, that there's a voice in the back of my head wondering if this guy is going to follow me to the car and toss me in his trunk along with the cantaloupe. Every girl feels uncomfortable and vulnerable and afraid out in the world because everything is so much bigger and so much stronger. Your body is something men deeply want and need. I'm fortunate I don't get it as bad as a lot of girls because I'm kind of a jerk. Guys tend to like nicer girls, probably because they are easier targets. There's also the fact that many girls are prettier than me, more composed, feminine. I want you to keep this in mind as you read my story. Remember it when I'm swept up in his loving arms, and remember it when he is crushing my throat shut on the floor.
Start that over.
I want you to keep this in mind as you read my story. Remember it when I'm swept up in his loving arms, and remember it when he is crushing my throat shut on the floor. John and I were magic together. I felt it the first time we met. People are drawn to magic, but magic can be dark and dangerous. He looked right through me with those overcast eyes when I caught him staring from across the bar. I knew we were a match set the first time I set my eyes on him. Hunter meets huntress. It wasn't love at first sight. Love requires data. Only an idiot would equate a fabulous first impression with the density of love, but you can see someone and know they are going to impact you. Silly me, I thought it would be for the better. If you're reading this, then you know the basics. I shot my boyfriend. While that statement is true, it isn't the whole truth. I squeezed again and kept squeezing even after the gun was empty. Then I was dragged to the ground in an instant, as if the whole universe began rapidly expanding and gravity with it, holding me down, paralyzed. Head stuck to the floor by an invisible force, I watched the man I loved writhe and gasp. Unable to blink, I watched him die in a waking pause. It took me 27 minutes to shrink the earth, stand up, and call the police. Those minutes were a singularity where the function of my life was infinite. How long would it take you to reassemble yourself after being pulled apart in the center of a black hole? It took me 27 minutes. Had I been able to recover quicker and sprint to the phone, I don't think the police would have charged me with murder. That doesn't mean if I weren't arrested, things would have been fine, but they certainly would have been better, at least a little bit. This isn't a tell-all, it's a tell-everything. Note for dissonant note, a perfect transcription of how I came to kill a man and why that doesn't make me the devil. My life is every bit as torn apart as the man's I shot. The same goes for all our family and friends. This book isn't about forgiveness, it's about atonement. If I can convince one guy or girl to abandon their terrible romance the way I couldn't, then it was worth my time to write. I hope that I provide a modicum of closure to everyone involved and leave no questions unanswered, especially to the people who love John. I know my name is tarnished forever, no matter what I say. The stench of this will linger the rest of my life, if not in your heads, then in mine, even though I know that I did what I had to do. It's never the right thing to kill someone, but sometimes it's the only choice. A lot of people haven't bothered to gather the facts before labeling me a murderer. I was defending myself. I did not murder Jonathan Bray. The jury didn't acquit me because of the playfulness of my hair or any of the other made-up media garbage that will float out there forever, poisoning my waters. The jurors found me not guilty because I am not a murderer. You may not believe me now, but by the end of this book, so help me God, you will.
Chapter 19. You don't get anything in life unless you ask for it. After Erin's meeting, I went straight home and dug the book out from underneath the bed. I buzzed through it in a few hours, and on the second and third passes I started writing notes in the margins. By sunrise, the kitchen table had a polychromatic spreadsheet of sticky notes stretched 4 feet wide, and I was maniacally looking for inconsistencies and half-truths. I used yellow for the prosecution's perspective, neon green for the defense, blue for questions to myself, orange for food pontifications set way off to the side. At 9 o'clock, I decided to walk the dog before I got ready for work. Zeke and I walked up the hill to the end of the street like every other morning. The road didn't end in a cul-de-sac. Instead, there was a long metal guardrail half the width of the road with a diamond sign bolted to the middle. Dead end, it read. I agreed. The long night of study created more questions than answers. I freed my anxious dog into the grasslands. The snap of the leash sent Zeke sprinting up the nearest slope to mark all 4 of the sparse pine trees that leaned eastward at the top. Over the hill and into the bottom of the valley I plopped. Clouds drifted over the top of the trees, whose bottoms I couldn't see. The earth appeared to be picking up speed, and I cursed myself for not sleeping. Zeke had his beak shoved way into the ground when a picture from Charlie hit my phone. The dog's puffy tail swatting back and forth like windshield wipers in a northern downpour. On the screen, a mountain lion was sprinting with a medium-sized dog in its maw. The caption read, "These are so much easier than deer." Then he sent me the link to California Wildlife's instructions on what to do if you come across a mountain lion in the wild. Wave your hands, throw rocks, try to look big. If it attacks you, don't run. Food runs. Playing dead is for bears, he said, unless you see cubs. I began screaming for the dog, and after his pre-programmed delay, he came, nose covered with dirt. I had no idea there were dog-eating lions in California. The monsters were everywhere but my bedroom. I scanned the hillside. I peeked between every house for lurking cats on the way home. I hoped I didn't catch the belly dance of a curious tail against the bright sky wall. The newest information is what you fear most. We assume time is an indicator of likeliness. The anxiety built with every step, stacking its way up to my dizzy head, and before I collapsed with panic and tiredness, my eyes became temporary space telescopes. They zoomed 1,000,000 times magnification and found more monsters everywhere I turned my head, Zoom, zoom to the dirt and chemicals and bacteria around my feet. Zoom, zoom to the atoms racing through everything with mushroom cloud force. I raise my head and zoom, zoom to the sky and the trapped gases and pollutants and carcinogens. Zoom and the infinite cataclysmic comets in the center of life, the sun. Zoom, and I saw it for what it really was. An impossibly large ball of 100 zillion endless nuclear explosions. So I turned away in fear, and I looked out on an empty part of the sky, and zoom, 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 poof. 100 billion, million, trillion more galaxies, and stars and planets, all screaming through infinity, whose surfaces would explode or melt or freeze or crack me back into a string of lonely atoms. Death was everywhere, a lion between the houses, a spot of empty sky, what's underfoot, over heel, ubiquitous, you will be eaten, a lion, a virus, a fire, or the monster with the biggest teeth of all, time. It devours to survive, and it has a taste for infinity. This cynical epiphany brought me to my knees in the front yard of my home. I held my chest and gasped for air while the dog barked and jumped. "Alex! One of those goddamn bees get you?" Annie said. Zeke ran over to greet the lady of the manor, knowing my condition wasn't serious. I held up a finger to let her know I needed a second to compose myself. Annie was on her rocking chair when I walked up to the stoop. She had a glass of pale lemonade that was half gin. Annie didn't sit there every morning or have any routine other than making sure her eyelids were caked with purple eyeshadow. In the house, she'd shown me pictures of her black and white wedding where she rode in a lime green convertible for the first time. Her eyeshadow was the same color, even in muted grays. "Morning," she said. "Hope the cell phones really are killing those bastards. Morning, Zeker. He's a good boy. Is he getting bigger?" The rocker was sideways so her feet could be in the sun, which kissed the corner of the porch. The dog had been a huge issue when I moved in, but now she loved him. Annie swore up and down that my extra-large dog looked like he was bred to kill. Zeke was a mastiff, which makes him half as smart as other dogs and twice as lazy. So lazy that when he hears a noise outside, he usually opens and shuts his mouth rather than waste energy barking. "He's getting fat, Annie. Getting old." Zeke laid down on a cool pile of mulch, where the hedges blocked the sun. I sat on a porch step to keep her company. She was the only person I talked with any frequency. We didn't like each other much, but we both needed the companionship. "Thank you for letting him out last night." "You were right. He did his business and ran right back downstairs." She was holding her glass in her lap with two hands, and the condensation pulled on the wrinkled top of her fingers. "How's that new job going?" "I like it more than I thought I would." "Your generation needs to learn how rewarding hard work can be. New kid came to mow the lawn. Little jerk ran the damn mower over the marigolds." "I told you I'll still mow. I enjoy it." "You come up with any new recipes I can try?" "Not really. I just do what I'm told. I've helped with those freebie spoonfuls that people get to start the meal. The amuse-bouche?" If she had sunglasses on, she'd have tipped them down her nose. "Yeah, sorry. I didn't want to bore you with jargon. Young people. Every time you discover something, you think you were the first to do it. James and I had a French place we frequented when he was still here. God rest. He wasn't much for trying new things, but we went on my birthday, so we had to go anywhere I damn well pleased. It was down the road a piece, closed 12 years ago, I think." Annie kept her hands encircled on the glass while she took long, slow gulps. I wondered if the reverie she had for her dead husband was genuine, or a reward for surviving an awful marriage, a small revision in her mind to improve what time she had left. "My doctor says I should walk more, but I don't have no reason to," she said. "That beast of yours, he pull?" "If the sun is out, then I'm the one doing the pulling. He isn't much for this weather," I said. Zeke was on his side, licking at the air with a bunch of mulch in his teeth. "You think I could walk him, maybe in the afternoons, now that you're gone? Any time you want, you go right ahead and let yourself in. He could use the exercise." "So could I. When do you work next?" "I work tonight, and I think I have a date soon, too." Annie held up a finger and went inside to fill her glass. She checked her makeup in the reflection of the storm door before walking in. "That's a relief. I never see you with anyone, and I thought you might be one of them new people they're talking about creating a third bathroom for," she said. It would have been a lot more offensive if she had been less old or less drunk. It's a girl before you ask, I said. She pretty? I didn't know how to answer that. The question was like wearing a pair of pants that used to fit, but now you struggled to get them buttoned, and once you did, it reminded you how good you used to be, better and slim. All I could do was shrug my shoulders. Of course she is. She's lovely, I'm sure, but that don't matter. What matters is how you feel when you get home. Are you being dirty? Oh, Alex, you'll know when I'm being dirty. When you get home, you ask yourself what's next. If you can't wait to see her or call her, then you'll know you're onto something. Once her glass sat empty on the ground next to her chair, I picked myself up and descended into the bottom half of the house to get ready for work. You don't get anything in life unless you ask for it. Before I'd left with the dog that morning, I called Erin and asked her out for ramen. She said yes. I hadn't spent much time in San Francisco proper. I toiled my life away in the basement watching people eat on TV. I cooked a lot more than I could eat, so if I made something I thought Annie might like, I'd take it to her. The rest of it went to the dog, as long as it was safe for him to eat. Everyone knows dogs can't have chocolate, but they can't have onions or garlic either. Let's go into the city, Erin said on the phone the morning of our date. Then she pressed me about which hills I'd eaten on or under. My list was too short for her to stand. We have to go, right now. Get on the train and meet me at the MacArthur station. We can head in together. Go, go! I got in my car and headed towards the BART station. The sky was a washed-out blue, lined with slim rows of gray clouds that looked like lines of Sanskrit prose. I wound into town, over wavy grass hills with pine mohawks. In every direction was a wonder of the west, valleys of grapes for rotting to the north, the can't-see-it-all-in-a-lifetime majesty of Yosemite to the east, a star city of plastic people to the south, and my destination to the west, over the water but not quite to the sea, San Francisco. Curving southbound on a barren country road, I was in the hollow center of everything. When I was growing up in the Midwest, almost everyone thought they'd be better off if they relocated to one of the wrinkled edges of America, that a 20-minute drive to the nearest movie theater meant they lived in the middle of nowhere, and that America being the best place only applied to the outer rim. Most people thought that the boring flats they came from were a purgatory until you made your way somewhere more interesting, that if they could just make it to the water, then life would be sweeter and more complete than any world they could craft out there between the mile-wide squares of corn and wheat. At the station, I waited 7 minutes behind the yellow line before the train came grinding towards me. The front car looked like it had an eye patch with one offset window coming my way. I beat myself up all day with the ifs and hows, and when I crossed over the yellow paint, the cool cabin air washed away some of the fear. The car was empty except for 2 teenage boys who sat with their backs to the window and feet up on the seat, at that age where the worst thing they could do was something not cool. I flung myself into the first row and braced the window ledge as the train vibrated a few times, then departed. You don't get anything in life unless you ask for it, I kept telling myself.
With and Without You, page 38. Everyone caught the fever the summer of 1994. It was sudden. One day the kids were fine, and the next they were mad for soccer. It was the year World Cup soccer came to America. I was 9, but I told everyone I was almost 10, a freckled tomboy with a meaty single braid that bopped around when I ran. I remember watching the opening ceremony on TV. My dad shot his eyes at me when the wavy-haired singer missed the empty net, like he did when Grandma said something racist at dinner. We always had that connection. I knew when his eyes were trying to find mine so he could tell me what he was thinking. Soccer games don't have commercials. Instead, they have a sponsor's plaque in the upper left corner. Computers can put them all over the screen now and we don't notice, but in those days it was voodoo magic to my young mind. I was mesmerized as it switched from candy bars to credit cards, and each time I didn't recognize what was being sold to me, I forced my dad to explain what it was so I could ask for it at the store. "Erin, watch the game," he said. "This only happens once every 4 years, and even then our team doesn't always get to play." Once the game started and the U.S. team did well, that was it for me. I was going to be a soccer player. I didn't think girls were allowed to play soccer. I'd never seen one. I knew it was called football in Europe, and girls couldn't play American football, so logic dictated it must be forbidden. I was going to be a pioneer, the first girl to play. I told this to my mom, and she added it to the list on the refrigerator of futures I dreamed up for myself. It was written right underneath Attack Dog Untrainer. This was a profession I invented after being jerked away from a police dog at the mall that I tried to pet. I wandered a lot as a kid, up to strange animals to pet them, and to strange people so they'd pet me. My mom dragged me away and told me they were trained to attack and couldn't be pet like a regular dog. When I told my dad about my career as a soccer star, he hopped out of his recliner and spun me into the garage. He climbed around on the shelves and threw down blue tarps and canoe paddles. He cursed and almost fell, but eventually a half-deflated soccer ball bounced once and died in the middle of the cracked garage floor. It didn't hold air very well, but we kicked it around anyways. I wore my softball cleats and he wore his slippers. We passed the flat ball back and forth for an hour in the scorched summer grass. That fall, he enrolled me in park soccer and volunteered to coach our team. I figured he had to coach because all the other coaches refused to roster a girl. Imagine my surprise that first practice when I found out I wasn't even the only girl on my team, let alone the entire league. We had 10 boys and 3 girls, aged 10 and 11. I was finally 10 and proud of it for a month before I started longing for one more year. This is a great age for co-ed sports. Puberty just started for me, and I was taller than almost all the boys save for one, Jimmy Becker. Jimmy was 10 too. We both went to Eisenhower Elementary, but were in different classes. He was in a normal class, and I was one of the pariah mob of the gifted and talented class. Kids were bussed in from around the county to be in this class, but I had gone to this school since kindergarten. The smart kids all got it bad, but I felt like I was taunted a little bit more because I was playing for the other team on my home field. There were 2 Jimmys, Soccer Jimmy and School Jimmy. Soccer Jimmy called me Dot, and his voice turned up as he said it to pass the ball, and down if there was someone behind me trying for a steal. At school, he called me Spot. It didn't seem like much of a difference, but at school, Spot would be followed by commands, like he owned me. See Spot run, see Spot fall, see Spot cry. It was humiliating. Then at practice, I was Dot again, the right wing to his left, that without the team couldn't fly. After the last game of the season, we ate our oranges and drank our juice boxes, and my dad rattled off a canned speech about what team means that he probably stole from a stupid sports movie. He asked each of us to tell the team the most important thing we learned this season, and when it was Jimmy's turn, he bit his lip a little, looked at my dad and said, "Girls can kick butt too." Then he looked at me. My heart sank along with his eyes. I thought he was apologizing, and I instantly forgave him. In the shuffle of handshakes and the heartbreak of loss for the other team, I stole Jimmy behind a tree and gave him my first kiss. Thus began my love for divided men. I have no idea if it was his first kiss, and it was the only we ever shared. The championship trophy from that year is still in my old bedroom at my parents' house. They turned it into a guest room once they were sure there was no chance I'd be coming back, but left my childhood achievements sitting on the dressers as decor. Mom doesn't let them gather dust, but time has worn off some of the shine. When I visit home and see that trophy, I don't think about Jimmy Becker, but I do every time I eat an orange. Once I peel it and pull apart the halves, I dig at the pith with my nails, and no matter how careful I am, I always manage to break some of the skin. The smell that comes up from the meat, that's Jimmy. I throw the pith away. That's Jimmy too.
Chapter 20. When I got off the train, Erin was on the platform of the Red Line, leaning against the metal frame of the station map. She stood in the ocean, the city to her west outlined by a tangle of colored tracks and their stops. Her eyes were on me as soon as I stepped out, like she knew which car I was in and which door I was going to step out of. The gauze on her hand traded for a simple butterfly bandage. She wore a more date-appropriate dressing for a flesh wound. Her hair was down and wavy as a rusted kris, covered in the happiest green cotton, with ringed leather sandals, like the Roman legionnaires that carried the hammers and nails up the Appian Way. "I realize this isn't going to work on the way over," she said. "The first rule of dating says I have to order a salad wherever we eat." She tripped and caught herself on my shoulder as we turned towards the ramp. "I think that rule's been amended," I said. Her hand was on my shoulder, and she hopped on one foot, trying to jiggle her big toe back into the loop of her shoe. "The salad has to have beets and goat cheese." The awnings of the station covered everything in shadow. Peregrine flashes of Oakland came up through the cracks between the walls on the moving train. I peered out the window, trying to figure out if Erin's body should land on the near or far side of the tracks when I pitched her in at the end of the night. We shared a ceiling strap for balance. The buzz and bounce of the car made loose strands of her hair tickle my neck. The windows became dark in the transbay tube under the water. The overhead lighting was bright, and our faces reflected back in the windows that became black mirrors. Each time I blinked, her expression changed. Expectant, reluctant, hopeful, sad. The doors opened and she grabbed my hand and led me up, up, up into the lumps and humps of the city center. "How much time have you spent here?" she asked. "Not that much. I usually walk up Stockton and sample foods I don't recognize from Chinese grocers I can't understand. Then I pick a random restaurant and eat the strangest things on the menu. I spend the rest of the day trying to walk that off so I can gorge myself on ramen. On the shame-filled ride home, I promise myself I'll join a gym." The bells of a streetcar rang in the distance, and a man with a handful of fan gelato spoons called us into his shop for a taste. "You've never even been to the wharf?" "I don't like Star Trek." "Oh, shut up. Turn around. You can't call it stupid tourist stuff until you've done it. Sea lions first. I love them so much." She flipped me around by the wrist and dragged me back towards the water, which was close enough to smell. California was the land of dreams and beauty and money and hope to those who weren't here, but to me it was the land of lions. Danger was everywhere. Lions in the hills that eat your dog, lions in the water to eat escapees from Alcatraz. On the street, a lioness led me in bright green, beautiful and charming, a deadly disguise. I knew it, and I knew it, what she was, and I felt it in my wrist with her clamp so tight it hurt. It didn't matter. I was helpless. The way the folds in her dress wound inward and then jumped out when she stepped, the way her hair carouseled up and then down. She was the leader of our pride. Following her voice and the spin of her dress, I wanted to drag her back into my body one moment, and in the next spin her into oncoming traffic. A minute later I was standing on a giant box with the sourdough mass of tourists beneath me. Down in the water was a cuddle puddle of sea lions, arfing and slapping. They didn't look dangerous. The lions stacked themselves on astroturfed islands, and every so often one was ejected from the bottom row. The crowd laughed, most of them watching the fray through the screen of their phone or tablet. "Follow me," she said, and snuck around the corner. There was a huge crowd circled around a shirtless street performer. His forearms were as thick as my legs, and his legs as thick as my forearms. He had on a headset microphone attached to a loudspeaker, and he called out to the crowd. There were 4 metal platforms he used for handstands and gymnastics, and executed each move with Olympic grace. The performer called up to the diners on the upper balcony of a nearby restaurant to fold 20s into paper airplanes and then fly them down. People roared, and his top hat filled with paper money. Weaving through the crowd, we passed a row of stalls, each one's sign claiming "World's Best Bread Bowl." Erin told me to keep moving, and we went through a set of harlequin doors that led to an expansive penny arcade. Machines were scattered from every era of coin. Hand-cranked picture shows, gypsy fortune-tellers, and modern video games laid out in a path of discovery. I had 2 quarters in my pocket, and Erin dug one from her tiny purse. Rather than visit the bill eater in the corner, we interlocked arms and debated the 3 best machines to play. At the front of each machine was a golden tag with description. Like a movie preview, it was just enough information to look over and give a 1-word review to your date. A turn-of-the-century baseball game was stupid. The movie Pinball was lame, but Opium Den was weird and demanded it be the first machine to take our money. Opium Den was a diorama that came to life when fed a quarter. A group of Chinese lords sat with offensively slanted eyes and a 2-yellow tinge that was a combination of racism and age. The men slapped their knees and tilted their necks back in laughter at the 2 white men they shared the cave with. The first white guy was wrapped in a blanket. He looked sick and sat on a broken chair, holding a pipe. He jerked the smoking device from his mouth to his stomach in a disturbing way. The other white guy seized in a cubby on the back wall. He shook and kicked, and it was astonishing how well the 100-year-old strings mimicked the overdoses I'd seen in movies. "If I paid for this 100 years ago, I'd be pissed," I said. "It's a warning sign. The sick men, the seizure, the skeletons in the corner. This is the early 20th century version of This Is Your Brain on Drugs," Erin said. "Look at how healthy all the Asians look." "Prophecy, man," a broccoli-haired man said behind us. "China's still selling us trash, still killing us slowly." I led Erin down the aisle, and Veggie Head stepped forward and waited for someone else to put a quarter in so we could watch the pipes rise again. I caught the salt and sweet scent of kettle corn, but Erin stopped me before I could complain about being hungry. She had an expectant face, and her hand was out. I set a quarter on it, and she dashed to the next machine. In the case was a front gate of a medieval castle. After Erin dropped in a coin, a light came on, and the door swung open to reveal a platform with a prisoner, a priest, and an executioner. The priest raised his arm and foot in prayer, and when he was done, the executioner made a gesture at the guillotine, which then lopped off the prisoner's head into a well-placed bucket. His head landed face down, and the light went out. It made justice look simple. Erin looked in, and I wondered if she saw herself as the noble executioner or the man who got what was coming. But more importantly, I wanted to know which one she really was. "I'm hungry," she said. I'm confused, conflicted, distracted, and hungry. When we walked into the restaurant, the butcher behind the counter signaled with a wave of his knife that we could sit anywhere we liked. The sides of his face were different sizes, and he had a dime-sized mole on his left chin with hairs growing out of it, some of them gray. The floor was tacky on our march through a collection of reclaimed fast food tables that sprung up out of the ground with connected red bucket seats. Erin was heartened by my look of extreme skepticism when I sat down. I patted my foot around the bottom of the table to see if it too was unclean. I said good Chinese. This place looks awful. There was no sign other than the meat hanging in the window. The building was somehow located at the top of one hill, but the bottom of another. We were a few blocks outside the neon blinks and inaudible sales pitches of commercial Chinatown at a place Erin suggested. Everyone inside was Asian, except for us. Gail asked me if you were a germaphobe because you're so fastidious in the kitchen. I said I didn't know. Erin picked up the laminated menu and pulled it open and shut. It made a Velcro sound, and she grinned at me and did it again. The man up front took down a slab of red meat from the window and lopped off a chunk with a cleaver he hadn't wiped. I like things clean, that's all. I turned my menu towards her. This isn't English. I'll order. She waved over the waitress, a young Chinese woman. She had a perfectly round hair bun and gold chopsticks running through it in an X. You want English menu? No thanks. We want whole roast duck, Erin said and was cut off. Peepaw? The waitress asked. In the window. Red duck. Ah. Chopped up. And char siu pork. She pointed at the window and then pulled her fingers apart. This much. Rice and tea. The waitress looked over at me and bounced her pencil. Do you have soup dumplings? She nodded, but I was sure she didn't know what I meant. Steamed? She nodded again and walked away, her feet very close together. The waitress came right back with water, and I dipped the folded edge of my napkin and wiped at the area beneath my elbow, which turned out to be a crease in the tabletop and not grime. Do you always take guys here? I don't take guys anywhere. I told you it's been a long time since I've been on a date. How long exactly? A first date? Probably 4 years, she said and quickly followed up. What about you? I got out of a long relationship about a year ago, and I haven't dated since. It was true. When I left Julie and the perfectly acceptable middle-class life we built together, I told her it wasn't her fault, that the life I chose to lead wasn't fulfilling, and I needed to move far away and figure out who I was. In the moment, I was vomiting cliches as fast as I thought them to keep her pain to a minimum. It's hard to accept your own lies becoming true. The food came quickly. 2 platters of chopped meat, matched bowls of rounded rice, and a covered steam basket I hoped was full of soup dumplings. I was jealous of Erin's chopstick technique as she snapped up bits of meat. She was able to keep her middle finger between the sticks as she grabbed fatty duck and sticky roast pork. Erin fished out the triangular ass nubbin of the duck and offered it to me like a golden prize. I motioned that she eat it, and she sucked it dry and then tossed the leftover nugget on her plate with a fling of her sticks. The window meat was marvelous. It sat all day, for who knows how many days, getting beat up by sunlight and heat lamps, and yet it was tender and exploded with sour, sweet, spicy, salty goodness. Measured, gentle date-eating with the tips of our sticks quickly gave way to low-palmed shoveling that stained our lips red and made them stick. Once we tasted the soup dumplings, it became a chicken game of politeness to see who would eat the last odd piece. I gobbled it up the moment I realized what was going on and squished it down with a greasy grin. "What do you think they do with all the duck fat?" Erin asked. "I know they don't throw it out. It might be their fryer oil. I'll bet that butcher uses it in his hair." He was balding. I looked back at Erin, and she was touching her chin where his mole was. "Gross," I smiled. "I guess I don't need to ask if you like it." I was digging through the plate of duck bones for crisp skin bits. I keep telling myself to save room for ramen, but I can't stop picking at it. It's all that MSG. "It isn't bad for you, you know," I said. "I know," she said over me, and then together, "You can eat it by the spoonful." I think she may have said shitful. After spending the rest of the evening trolling galleries and eating great ramen, we ended our night on the same station platform it started, only I was the one leaning against the map. My bladder was bursting after downing too many Japanese beers with dinner. I felt bloated and drunk. While saying goodnight, I noticed the oncoming train. "No," Erin said, and then forgot what she was going to say. "Really?" Swaying in the two bright LED lights from the ceiling. "We should do it." "Wait, what are we talking about?" I stammered. "Ramen. Essen ramen." She shuffled towards me. I grabbed her shoulders. I dug my palms into the top of her arms. I looked her in the eyes, her nose raised upward, her face charged at mine. The train charged at us. I pulled her in. I looked over at the track. We were inches from the yellow line, and all I'd have to do was tip her sideways. The weight of the wine and dashi and rice and meat would carry her over, and all of this would come to an end. I looked back to Erin. Her eyes were closed. Her face came forward. I turned my cheek. Her lips hit me. They were supple and soft, sticky and wet. I pulled my face away. I said goodnight. I jumped into the car the moment the doors came apart. I put my hand on my face to wipe away the wet mess. I decided against it. I fell asleep when I got home. I don't remember if I saw John. Chapter 21. I woke up Monday to a flurry of texts from Erin. "Alex, Alex, wake up, wake up. ALEX, now, now, up. Shit. What type of ramen did we eat? Why are there so many? Get up. This is complicated. What's in dashi? I need you to come shopping with me. Please get up. Are the noodles really alkaline? Why are the eggs stained? Now you're just ignoring me. This is mean. I know where you live." I knew she was at the door before she knocked. Zeke shot his head up, and I pulled the covers over my head and covered my crotch. When the knock came, Zeke was going to leap, and I didn't want him using my genitals for leverage. "Good morning," I said in my best I'm not up yet voice. "I met your neighbor. She's nice in a trashy grandma sort of way," Erin said, kissing my cheek like a black and white TV husband who'd come home after a hard day's work. "I need some paper." She zoomed in and took a knee to greet the dog. Her calloused hand smashed his ears down under his jaw and rolled the loose skin back up in a wave. Their noses pressed together. Zeke flicked his tongue and she turned her cheek. At least he isn't afraid to kiss me. I felt violated when she wrung his ears with her scarred and bandaged hand, and I saw him fall for her. Dogs are the only creatures capable of unconditional love. Maybe we bred them that way. Maybe they don't remember well enough to stay mad. It might be that all the grouchy dogs are the ones with the best memories. Zeke buried his head in her chest, and Erin used his ears as handles to hold him off as long as she could. Eventually the giant dog let all his weight bowl her over, and then he smashed her face with his tongue. Erin scooted her butt across the living room floor to avoid him and happily shrieked with each slide across the carpet. "How do you turn him off?" she said, shoving on his nose. "Say the first part of PB&J. Peanut butter?" Zeke jumped back and sat down, then laid down, then stood back up and barked. "Get me a rubber band, too," she called to me. "I used to do this to my dog when I was a kid." The book may have planted the seed, but when she suggested torturing my dog, I truly began to question whether or not she was evil. That she might not be the bad guy. A demon tried to hide its claws. I snapped my fingers twice, and the dog laid down, a trick that only worked holding a jar and a spoon. I slid my butt down the wall and sat next to Erin and spooned up a sloppy canal of peanut butter. My head set on hers, the air filled with the scent of roasted peanuts and dog drool. "What's his name?" "Zeke," I said. "Any food make you this happy?" The spoon bobbed back and forth with each lick. "Yeah, peanut butter." Her smile was so wide I had to turn my head to see it all. What made her happy was making others happy. This is the main reason people cook. It isn't about feeding people, it's about making people happy. My toes tingled, a pang of lust, a wave of rage. They say you don't love someone if you never wanted to kill them. Her hair was covering my left ear, which made it hard to hear anything but the loud squeezes in my chest. I closed my eyes, and before John's body appeared, Erin swiped the back of the spoon across my nose. I let her hold me down so Zeke could ripple his granite tongue across my lips while I shook my head and spat. Drool dotted my cheeks, and there was some second-hand peanut butter smeared on the dimple between my nose and upper lip. Erin had me pinned to the ground, holding my wrists out in a Jesus Christ pose, legs crossed beneath her. "At least he isn't afraid to kiss me," I said. Then she kissed me, dug her lips between mine, and once they were on solid ground came the force of 10,000 fractured hearts, a rush of too much, too fast, too. It hurt, she hurt, we hurt. The beautiful disaster we both deserved. Erin eased the initial charge of her face and bound my hands together in front of her chest. Then she brought her nose into mine and gently pecked in the sweetest of gestures. She wiped the peanut butter and drool from her face, laughing. It was sweet and disgusting. I hated her, and I didn't. "I need paper," she said. "I have to make a list for ramen." Erin bounced up and looked for something to write on while I stayed on the floor, eyeball to eyeball with my sullen pet who thought I'd just replaced him. "This won't work. There's too much going on," I said. "You could work on it every day the next year and you won't have anything you can serve." "Let's not care about authentic. Let's just make something that tastes good. It's an interesting concept, something to get people talking, which we need right now. That asshole Jamie is probably posting more garbage as we speak." Erin pointed at her phone. "The only people who read blog comments are the ones who go there to crap on people to begin with." "What about this?" Erin held up my grief journal. "Can I write in here?" "Don't scream. Don't overreact." I got up deliberately and took the journal from her hand and leafed through it like it wasn't a murder confessional. What else was around here? No photos. I deleted all my social media accounts last year. I had a somewhat common name, so if you searched it on the web, you'd have to scroll through several pages of paintings from a superhero artist to find a picture of me, and the ones that showed up were at least 10 years old. I have a shaved head and a round face from drinking too much beer. I look extra fat and extra young. There's no way she could spot me. The book. What did I do with the book? "No, this is a journal and recipe book," I said. "Sit. You want something to drink?" I got some paper so Erin could scribble down her ideas for defiling Japanese cuisine while she drank lemon fizzy water. That list went with us to the Asian market, where their oddball marketing was too much to resist. We had to make a second trip to carry all the bags. I got the mayo with the creepy baby and a jar of fermented black beans that looked like shoe polish. Erin bought funny-looking bok choy and a jar of powdered pig that looked like the stuff lining my childhood Easter baskets. The shift was business as usual at the restaurant. Erin changed into her bossy black slacks and ordered me around the stainless steel track like all the other employees. It was a slow night. When Emily asked for her usual meal of pork schnitzel with lemon, I served her a breaded sponge instead. She sat at the empty bar, fighting to get her knife through the breading. When that failed, she grabbed it with both hands and took a bite. "Alex?" she said. The entire crew held their breath. I kept a straight face. Hands slapped tables. "Yes, Em?" "There's something wrong with my schnitzel." "What is it?" She pulled the breading off. "What the hell is this?" The entire kitchen burst into a fit of laughter. "Oh, you asshole. I'll get you back." A wave of oohs came from the staff. These cute little jabs didn't always go well. Last week, Tommy got another server to chew and swallow a bit of kitchen towel wrapped in bacon. It was so chewy the guy was moving his mouth in a circle trying to get a bite on it, and then gave up and glugged down the whole thing. When Tommy told him about the joke, the server punched him right in the face. His eye was still half black. Mike came in the front door at 11 to walk Emily to her car. He did this every night she worked. Mike treated Essen like he was part of it. He'd walk in the back and talk to the cooks, or go behind the bar and squirt himself a diet soda if Emily made him wait. "Alex, how you been?" Mike said. "Best night ever. I got Em to eat deep-fried sponge." "Oh, shut up," Emily said. "I only bit into it." "You guys are crazy. I heard someone got punched over something like that," Mike said. Tommy walked over. "Yeah, I heard you got a guy to eat shit. We're still working up to that." He bit into the towel over his shoulder and tussled with it. "We should get together, man. Have a guys' night," Mike said. "My best friend's flying in this weekend. Come out with us." "Sounds good. Hit me up this week." Back in the kitchen, Erin had the bags from the Asian market up on the prep table. The deadbolt clunked on the back door as Erin ushered Tommy out. She shuffled back to me, and I watched the empty doorway, eager for her to appear. Wearing a white V-neck tee with armholes twice the size of her arms, she came towards me with a bottle of Irish whiskey and 2 empty glasses. Whiskey was a skill I never acquired because I was lazy. Bourbon was a skill I never acquired because it's pretentious, and Scotch was a skill I never acquired because it's impractical. Just because something is far away or takes a long time to make doesn't make it good. Erin was a whiskey girl, but I wasn't a whiskey guy. Our relationship had serious flaws, but it stood a better chance than any pair of whiskey people. She slid me a glass. "Where do we start?" she said. "With some sleep?" Erin wasn't going to be deterred by sarcasm. She was prettier now than before, her hair sunset red, the color when that big exploding ball was almost retired for the day. When she reached across the counter to grab a towel, I looked down her shirt, my first oogle. I took my drink to her side of the table so we could stand hip to hip like an old couple on the same side of a booth in their favorite diner. She was wearing a touch of citrus perfume on her neck. Erin mirrored my pose, put her hand up on mine, and weaved her fingers over the top. We turned in towards each other, and our hive mind said, "Let's play." And that's what we did. We played with our food. We made cloudy broth that stunk and lingered in the nose, suntan gold dashi that smacked my lips and coated the stomach better than the most tannic wines, failed noodles that broke apart in the heat of the soup, roasted red pork that bordered on being as good as it looked. We swiped spoonsful of successes, failures, and a whole bunch of maybes. She guessed, I tested, she felt, I counted, she messed, I cleaned. The overwhelming joy of the creative pursuit overcame all anguish and bound adversaries. With each iteration of bastardized ramen, we got further away from what was customary and closer to our own kind of authentic, a bowl of soup that was honest but betrayed convention. It wasn't perfect, but nothing ever is. I'd created a lot of stuff in my life, but this was the first time I attempted art, the difference being that art is never finished because it's never perfect. At dawn, after 6 different revisions, we abandoned the noodles and the soup. In that tired moment, where all my senses had a 3-second lag, I remember one clear thought. I'd be all right if this was every night, forever. No soup is so good you can eat it forever, and anything you eat forever will eventually kill you. Grief Journal. Final entry. Essen Ramen version 6.0. Note from the author. This chapter serves as the notes that Alex just made, creating this German-Japanese hybrid. So I went ahead and made a real food with a real recipe. I love to cook and I love food, which is probably why I've included it in the book. And I invite you to go to my website, mikewehner.com, download the recipe and make it or share it or make fun of it. Do whatever you want. But it's a real thing that I worked very, very hard on. It's a Shio-style ramen, which means it has like this super seasoned broth, which is made out of Korean pepper paste and German Märzen beer and soy sauce and apple butter. And it's a very, very unique food, if anything else. So please download the recipe and let me know what you think of it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the book. Chapter 22. Erin and I tumbled down the street, hand in hand. My right foot stuttered because it was tired, and the left because it was unsettled. "I need breakfast," she said and tugged me around the corner by my wrist. The sun threw orange-red light over the city below the horizon. A garbage truck was the only car on the street. "Nothing is open," I said. "It will be by the time we get there. We're going the long way home." "To where?" She pointed towards a bicycle rack along the dock. I turned away. We looked like we'd been in an all-night food fight. Erin used my shirt as a towel to annoy me, that playful thing girls do when they want to touch you but don't want to be nice about it. The pepper paste swiped down my shoulders stunk, and a puff of flour was stuck to my neck like chalk from a shot put. Erin flopped up on a concrete planter, phone to her ear. She stuck out her arm and swatted at me. "Hey, I want to touch you, but don't talk." I stood there like an idiot and mouthed questions real slow. "Who are you calling? Where are we going? I'm fucking tired." Each ing bore my teeth, which I didn't like to do because my gum line sat lower than was appropriate. Nobody called me gummy or said my teeth were too small. It wasn't too low for people, it was too low for me. I obsessed over the traits I had no control over. Weight didn't concern me. I could move that slider in any direction. Gum line length, the extreme thinness of my ankles, hammer toes. These were my obsessions. I never take my socks off in front of people, especially girls. John never would have dated me. "Emily is coming to get us," she said. Erin hooked her heels around my calves to pull me close. "You smell like shit." She shoved me away. I wiped her face on my shirt. She struggled for a second and then turned her cheek to rest it above my belly button in a wet spot. I wound her hair around my fingers, row by row, her face half buried in my mess of a chest. "This is so..." She struggled to find the right word. "Nice." Every time she tugged me close, the concrete ledge of her seat mashed my crotch. I stuck my butt out and clung. "What is?" I asked. "Having someone to hang on to." "I'm really uncomfortable right now." "That's what makes it so good." Emily pulled up with a scowl on her face. She stared us down while we walked around the car, letting us know it was simultaneously too early and too late. "Jesus, I hope you guys didn't screw looking like that," Emily said with sunglasses low on her nose. "I knew you were going to be a thing." "Emily, stop it." Erin motioned to sit in the back with her. "We need food." "It's 5 a.m. You haven't slept and you're covered in God knows what. I'm taking you home." "It's egg. Your sister used me as a towel," I said. "I'm sure she did," Emily said. I sat behind the driver's seat, and her chunky blonde curl bobbed out the side of the headrest. It was the same twist that had broken free and saved her life. A fortunate ripple of hair that grew slower than the rest. A golden spin that smelled most like Emily's hand, forever being tucked and tucked again behind her ear. "Emily, where's Mike? Are you a thing yet?" Erin said. "No, I can't get over what he used to do." "Kill people?" I asked. "He never killed anyone in the Navy," Emily said. "But that's what you do in the Army. Erin said it was the Army." "He was a mortician in the Navy." I thought she was joking. "That's what someone who killed people would want you to think," I said. "I want eggs," Erin said, "in Sausalito." I imagined Sausalito as some sort of kitschy restaurant where all the dishes are based on sauces with pun-filled variants. "How do you want that eggs Benny? Classic, Arnold, or Pope?" "We're not going to goddamn Sausalito. We're going home." "Ask him, Alex. His family lives above the funeral home they own in Oakland." "Sounds fishy, but it's better to dress people than make them," I said. "Wrong way. I need eggs. Wrong way." "Eat the egg on Alex's shirt or wait until we get home." "Em, you have to take me home or my dog will die." "Do you have eggs?" Erin said. "Maybe," I said, patting her on the head. "Driver, take me to the eggs. Alex will direct you." She looked up at me. "We need to go to Sausalito, though. Best breakfast." Erin dug her nose between my pepper-pasted shoulder and the back seat, took in a deep breath, and fell asleep. You good with that, Alex? Yeah, she could take the train back to town after we get some rest. Erin? Emily called. She's out. I followed the cracks on the empty road, and Emily followed my directions. She hummed a low pop melody to stay awake. Every time I moved, Erin stuffed her nose deeper into the seat. You know, I was kidding earlier about the sex thing, right? Of course, I said. Is she really sleeping? Yeah. Has she told you how long it's been since she's been out with anyone? Sort of. Did she tell you why? Sort of. So you know what she's been through. I know enough to be careful. Be good to her. She's my favorite person. I don't think she's ready, if I'm being honest. It was the worst way to end the day. I leaned on the cool glass window for comfort, and instead the vibration made my jaw buzz. I hurt in that moment more than ever. I hurt for what was lost and what was found, for who I was, for what I was, and what I used to be. I no longer had direction. My inner compass spun. Every part of my consciousness felt untethered, floating loose in an impermeable sea of nothingness. I grit my teeth. John and I always liked the same girls. Impossible women. Nothing could have been more impossible. My hopes for Erin realized my fears of John. A contradiction too complicated for daybreak. A day ago I was chasing answers that were either good or bad. Now they were both. One team was going to win, and my interests were fully vested on both sides. Flip and flop. Love or grace, honor his memory. One will betray the other, and one thing is certain. I didn't have much time. The clock was the limit test of my own sanity. This was pulling me apart. Emily begged Erin to go home with her, but Erin followed me to my door. I walked fast, tried to lose her in Annie's tangled garden. The dogs shot up the stairs to make when I opened the door. Erin traipsed into the living room and peeled her stained shirt over her head. It hung up on her necklace. She kicked her shoes off in the middle of the living room and dug her thumbs into the tops of her pants. Down they went, around her hips, down, around her knees, down, down, down. She disappeared into my bedroom. The water from the shower fluttered, and I stood paralyzed in the doorway, halfway in, halfway out. That faucet is tricky, I said through the door. It had taken me 20 minutes to figure out the day I moved in. It's fine. Come on in. Steam surged out from beneath the door. She'd figured it out. Figured me out. The shower curtain was opaque, with geometric shapes at the top which faded to a clear bottom. Her wispy calves were the only part of her body in full resolution. I sat on the toilet in my boxers, petrified. Erin twisted at the knobs. Should I leave the water on? Yeah. I slung a towel over the top of the shower. She stuck her head out the side of the curtain. You're being quite a gentleman. I don't want to be fired for sexual harassment. She buckled the towel underneath her armpit. Her hair was dry and pinned up. Erin kissed me when I pushed myself towards the shower, and she yanked me back towards the door. Stage direction. Erin went into the bedroom, and I shoved my head underneath the hot water, hoping to melt. The job I could handle, the banter, brushing hips, fake friendship, that was fine. We can do dinner. A fake double date? No problem. A real date? I can fake that. I liked her a little. What was the harm in that? A kiss. That was tough, but I got through it. Oh, you think you love her? Don't be an idiot. You love all of them, you lecherous cunt. Now she was naked, in my bedroom. That I couldn't handle. No window to jump out of. The bathroom's cinder block walls were surrounded by stone and dirt. Under the shower I scrubbed at my skin so hard it turned red and puffed. The water beat on me as it cooled, and I scrubbed more. No matter how much friction I applied, I couldn't get clean. The water got so cold my testicles retreated into my stomach. I stayed in the shower. Maybe she'll fall asleep. I shut the bathroom light off once I was dry. Zeke was in the doorway, and I shoved him out with my foot so he didn't accidentally jolt Erin awake with the cold tip of his curious nose. There was a porthole window over the bed, the legal minimum. It let in tiny streaks of light from the street. Silence and near darkness calmed me. You don't let him watch? She said. Her voice almost knocked me down. He'd want to join. You already made out with him, so I can invite him back in if you like, I said from over there in the dark, trying to buy more time. A sneaker crunched under my foot. I turned on the lamp next to my bed. Erin took my hand in hers, pressed it to my heart, her forearm straight down my chest. She reached back to the lamp. Her other hand pinched the top edge of my towel. Click. Chapter 23. The feminine reflection in the bathroom mirror was wearing a set of mismatched "nobody's going to see me naked today" underwear and staring at me when I woke up. It was a small comfort that this wasn't planned, that I wasn't a target. Erin was digging around in a drawer, and I wondered if she left the door open when she peed. "What are you looking for?" I said from the bed. "Tweezers. Behind the mirror, top shelf, right side." She grimaced when she opened the cabinet. A real man isn't so organized. A real man would pick at himself like an ape. "There's a blonde hair in my brow. Do you ever get weird hairs?" Life was a weird hair. "Yeah, I get a black one on the back of my arm once a month." Shoulder to shoulder, we searched each other for rogue hairs. I combed my hands up and down her arms, looking for something I could jerk out of her. I took tweezers and yanked at a few hairs that were perfectly clear just to hear her squeak. I shoved the toothbrush into my mouth, so I didn't have to talk while she ran her fingers across me and dug out rough patches of dead skin from my back. It was a game of chicken. Someone had to talk about what went on in the bedroom, but it wasn't going to be me. I was conflicted, filled with shame that I crawled into bed with her, but ever grateful to the universe for afflicting me with my first case of erectile dysfunction. Mouth overflowing with aqua foam, it was my turn again, and I inspected the backs of her arms. I squeezed each tiny tube, looking for some remnant of the triceps muscle that was supposed to be there. I don't get them on my arms, but I get a giant blonde hair that grows out of the top of my right ear. I never remember to check for it, so if I get a funny look from a stranger, I'll run to the bathroom all clammy and self-conscious to see if it's come back. Erin ran her thumb along the edges of my ears. "Don't move," she said. "Fuck!" The outside of my canal burned where she tried to rip part of me away. "Don't be a pussy." I jerked back after the second failed attempt. The root went deep. The sting lasted a second, and she set my head back into place with her fingertips to search for more. I yipped each time she yanked. "It would hurt less if you had good tweezers. These have no bite," she said. "Are you enjoying this?" This was payback for being unable to perform. At least we'd been up all night, and I had a legitimate excuse. It didn't take much convincing to get her to go to bed and stop tugging on my dysfunctional member. Right before she plucked, she set her thumb on the fleshy bump in front of my ear hole, and it made a huge whoosh in my head. The sound telegraphed her strike and crinkled my nose. She ran her fingers slowly over my scar. "How'd you get this?" The lump in my throat grew. I snapped the tweezers out of her hand and turned her around. "Baseball injury. Gravel tore me up sliding into second." "Ouch." Erin turned her attention to my neck. "Tell me about your friend coming to visit." My mind was so busy fighting between perception and reality, lust and memory, that I'd forgotten about Charlie. He was the least complicated person I knew, but right now he was a huge complication. "A friend from college. Charlie. My best friend, really," I said, and felt the pressure bubble under my feet, all the repressed emotions rising like punch-down dough, out of sight and out of mind. "Where's he live? Chicago?" "Oregon." "What's he do there?" "He works for the state. He's a ranger or warden, whatever you call the people who prevent poaching." I grabbed my phone and opened our last conversation, where Charlie was losing his mind because he found out Komodo dragons were venomous. Erin next to me, I invited her to look so she'd stop grooming. A few finger flicks of bear and wolf memes, and she got the gist. "Oh, one of those guys," she said. Passionate people understand each other. I never had a passion, so maybe that's why I found Charlie so cloying at times. Food helped me understand him. Until then, I simply existed, but Charlie knew why he existed. Food gave me a purpose, which wasn't any better than finding one in trees or bears or salmon. Charlie's unending enthusiasm for the wild used to be grating, and I thought it was because I didn't share his interest. It was because I didn't have anything to offer in return, No subject of my own to put a shovel in and dig. That's how humanity thrived. People digging different places and sharing. The revelation that I had a shovel and a spot was tempered by the fear that Erin would find me out and bury me alive. I set my phone on the sink and stepped behind her. How long I had imagined this slasher snapshot, alone, hands around her throat, playing with her hair in a damp basement. I'd seen this moment in my head 1,000 times. I squeezed and she said, "Lower." She was supposed to scream. A defective déjà vu. I wiggled my thumbs between her shoulder blades and shook my head in disbelief. I ran my hand over her cliffs and peaks, pleasing to the eyes but not the hands. The collarbone, the shoulder blades, the notches running down her spine. She lacked continuity, felt reassembled. Erin held her hair up and careened her neck to the left. I looked down at my hands. "I have to get back to the restaurant," she said. "Take my car. I'll take the train in a while." I tossed her a fresh shirt and caught the glare of the sun off the white dust jacket of her book beneath my side of the bed. The copy was now well worn. "You all right?" she said with half a shirt over her head. "It's been a crazy week." "I feel the same way. Trust me. Don't worry about last night. It's not a big deal." I stepped in front of the bed and patted my crotch like a good dog returning a tennis ball. Erin walked into the kitchen and opened 2 cabinets before she found a glass of water, her steps light and happy. "Are you hungry?" she asked. I was supposed to be the one asking the questions. I couldn't believe how she worked, lived, and loved. It didn't matter to her what happened back there. She was always right here, right now, and she was happy about it. A dead body in the living room, a dead dick in the bedroom. There wasn't anything she couldn't shake off. I told her about a bakery down the street where she could get a croissant and what smelled like good coffee. Her kiss goodbye was full of hope and joy and relief. After she left, I slid her book out from under the bed with my big toe and shoved it back, shaking my head. The phone buzzed. I tried to get my toe to stick to the cover and lift it open while I mashed at the phone's keyboard. Crappy mic. "You work today?" Me. "Yeah, at 3. Crappy mic. "Meet me for lunch in town. It's important." Me. "'Kay. Need an hour. I want a burger." We met at Scoop's Diner. It was in a strip mall, so it lacked the standard aluminum facade, but inside was pure American yesteryear. There was a white comedy duo on the wall in blackface next to the coat rack. Mike stared off through the slats in the front window when I walked in, his arms bent in an A-frame on top of the laminated menu. I slid a Corvette-looking chair across the black and white tile. Mike knocked over the metal napkin holder, putting his arms to his side. "Are you sure they have burgers here?" I said. "Don't get all foodie on me now." Mike pushed back from the table. "Campy, fast, and cheap," I said. "Just how I like my girls." "That's not what I hear." He had a concerned tone. "What do you mean?" I perused the milkshakes, my stomach in need of something cold and frothy. "Emily told me Erin stayed with you last night." "Sir, yes, sir," I said, and hoped mocking the military would lead us away from the conversation he wanted to have, maybe devolve into a heated debate on foreign policy, and if that failed, a frank discussion on the irony of putting makeup on dead soldiers. "Real talk, Alex. Are you guys dating?" The thick hammies of a middle-aged waitress waited by, and the air filled with seared cow and fried potatoes. "We've been on 1.5 dates. I wouldn't call that anything." Out loud I called it nothing. Inside, it was something. A gooey caramel center wrapped in a million rubber bands, and my fingers ached from straining at the middle. The waitress slid us 2 plastic glasses of water and promised to be back soon to take our order. "I don't know how to tell you this," he said, and took a long pause. I turned my head to soften the blow, to ease the transition from delusion to reality. "I just found this shit out, so don't think I've been holding out on you." He looked down and flipped his eyes up to build momentum. "Erin killed somebody. Not by accident, either. She killed her damn boyfriend, shot him point blank." Gasp. Careful not to overreact, I sat there, pretended to be stunned. I took long pauses between questions and bites of double cheeseburger. Mike stopped by Erin's that morning with a fast food breakfast for Emily. She was distraught when he got there. While they ate spongy hot cakes, she dished that Erin never dated anyone because of this horrible thing that she'd been through. Then she showed me this. Mike reached deep into his leather satchel and pulled out the book. I saw John and Erin in the shadows that rose up from the bottom of the cover, walking together, holding hands. The book clanked on the table. "It's her story," Mike said. "Emily told me to read it, said it was the only way for me to understand. I can't emphasize this enough. She said every word of it is true." Deep and sincere, he was worried about everyone. I scooped as much ketchup as I could onto my last thick-cut fry. "I know you must be shocked," Mike said. "I am too. I don't think she's a serial killer or nothing like that, but you need to be careful. I'll read this today. You want it when I'm done?" "No," I said with 3 head shakes. "I'll talk to her." "There's one more thing. When Emily handed this to me, she took my hands and told me if anyone ever tried to hurt her or her sister again, she was ready. She'd fucking gut them. It was scary." "That was your chance to ask her out." "I think she sees me as some kind of security blanket or something. After this shit, I'm not sure I want any part of her. Those eyes can summon demons. She's had bad shit happen to her, too. Unlucky ladies, I guess." I paid for lunch, and Mike pulled me in for a hug when I tried to shake his hand goodbye. At Essen, I evaded questions from the other cooks about the red eggs and noodles that were front and center in the cooler. It was the perfect distraction. Erin whirled around the kitchen. The scent that followed her made me as afraid as ever. Only now, instead of being afraid of what I was going to do, I was afraid of what I was going to lose. The twisted frenzy of the kitchen, the catharsis and imagination, impractical love. Difficult was exciting. My life of shortcuts now taking the long way around. "Alex, what is all this Asian shit?" Tommy said, holding up a plastic container of pickled shiitake mushrooms. "Do you see a wok? I wouldn't worry about it," I said. Ramen wasn't going to be on the menu anytime soon. It was an investigation into the unknown, a shovel full of dirt from somewhere neither of us had ever dug. We found each other in that hole. Erin called tickets out less authoritatively than usual, and her minions took notice. The cooks took turns accusing her of being stoned or withholding a good review. When I accused her of getting laid, Tommy balked and held up a container of poached eggs. "She doesn't have time for that when she's making this mysterious shit after we leave." "Tommy, those are eggs," Miguel said. "Yeah? Well, then why the fuck are they red?" "Magic." I didn't like Tommy, but we needed him. Boats need oarsmen. The rail cleared and the kitchen cleaned. Erin followed me out back to take the trash out. She wrapped herself around me while I tossed each bag into the open dumpster. "I'm so exhausted," Erin said, rocking me back and forth. Her feet dug under my heels. "Sunday'll be here soon." "Yeah, we're going to get up early and go to Sausalito. I never got my eggs." My nose even with the top of the garbage can, she rocked me from foul to fragrant, back and forth.
With and Without You, page 44. I've never been very good at talking to boys, not even the ones I liked. It's not that I'm self-conscious. I hate the boilerplate nature of it. I don't care about your calculator job or where you grew up. Pull up your shirt and show me the scar on your stomach. Show me the spot on your head where your oldest cousin baited you into a mailbox with a frisbee and he swears they had to pry you off of it like a hatchet stuck in a log. I don't want to hear about your loft or your car. Wins mean nothing. Show me your losses. Show me you're human and be funny about it. John did it in his own way. When we met, I was sitting at the end of the stamped concrete bar of my restaurant, enjoying a French martini. John glanced at me a few times, but when I finally caught his eye, he didn't look away. He stared me down. "This tastes awful. I don't know why I'm eating it," he said. I laughed one alarming cackle. He looked panicked. I could see his brain working as fast as it could to try and figure out what was funny. It was Monday night and I wasn't working, but a chef is always working and I had to put eyes on a new cook. John sat squinting at me, mouth filled with scallop crudo, next to a tumbler of gin, neat. "Maybe it isn't the food," he said. He knew from the sound I made that there was some irony happening, but he didn't make the leap all the way to chef. In his mind, I began as a waitress. I swiveled towards him to hear more about our mistakes, my mistakes. "It's the bartender. This crudo has blue cheese, so why would he let me order it when he knows I'm drinking gin?" "At least you aren't drinking Cabernet," I said. Besides, people get blue cheese olives in their martinis all of the time. You're too pretty to know anything about wine, he said. It would have been a weak come-on if I'd been a waitress and had that sort of thing happen to me. If I hadn't been so determined and so educated, I would have been a whole lot smarter. What he said should have been offensive, but he said it slow and earnest. He moved slowly, too, methodical, like he thought about everything before he did it. He was the one who was too pretty to know anything about wine. But he knew all about wine. The food, not so much. There were many terrible things I can and will say about John Bray, but he was no dummy. I should have known a man that handsome and that intelligent had hang-ups somewhere. We all have them, but most of us are lucky enough that our Mars are on the outside. But how could I have known anything about boys or love? I was a woman, but in love I had only ever been a girl. I'd only experienced temporary love you drive away from at the end of a semester, or love you never tell anyone about because it happened in a bathroom at a party. Nothing substantial, not before John. I found love because I was looking for it in that moment. If it hadn't been John, it would have been some other boy, but he walked into my life right when I was ready. I was done with school, done with stages and kitchens near and far. I was back in my hometown, leading a great team in what could have been a great restaurant one day. I remember taking a deep breath on my way home from work one night and thinking how it was time to share my life with someone, really share it. It's funny how a little thing like having a drink can change your life. That small thing that felt so good because I'd never had the privilege of doing it anywhere I'd ever worked. It felt so good to finally have a bit of rest, and it ended up ruining my life. I liked John right away, how straight he sat and that he listened to me when I spoke. But most of all, I liked that he spit out some blue cheese when I told him it was my food he found revolting. At our beginning, I had the upper hand. His face went flush, and he stammered with his napkin up to his mouth. John was always concerned with his appearance. This embarrassment was genuine. He spent so much time and effort on his hair and clothes that his insides went to rot. The soul needs maintenance too, but there are only so many hours in the day. I say that, but without all the floss and shine, maybe I wouldn't have been interested in him. After all, I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about parading him around and sticking him in my sister's face. She's thrown away more decent men than I've ever met. And if I met them, would I even like them? It's like we are born attracted to a certain type of person. This is something I think about a lot. On the surface, I am in perfect working order, but what if my great fault isn't in how I think, it's in what I feel? That's what makes me so afraid to love again, that I only want that which will betray me.
Chapter 24. The next night had a bite in the air, a little hint that summer was coming to an end. Erin and I walked the back alley to her car, and she peered in the back seat before getting in. "You drive," she said. She smelled the way I looked after a long day of work. It was exciting and horrible to be with her, like sifting through a dog's shit if you knew it had eaten a 6-carat diamond. A cricket sounded off in the garage when we pulled in. I turned the engine off, but the headlamps stayed on and crashed into the wall. Cases of beer and soda were to the left, a dusty refrigerator to the right. "Is life in the kitchen what you expected?" Erin said. "No, but nothing ever is." I set my hand on her lap and made a weird face. The cricket droned on as we walked inside. Emily was at the kitchen island with a bowl of cereal tipped to her face. She swiped the milk off her lips and gave me a skeptical glare. "Mike's bike is in the garage, isn't it?" Erin asked. "I think so," Emily muttered through milk and squash corn bits. "Do you think he would mind if Alex used it tomorrow?" "He's working. He won't know it's gone. A vineyard ride sounds fun." "We're going to bike the bridge." "That's stupid. Just drive over it." Our relationship was now at the stage where the girl made demands by assumption, a strategy that was great when you're dating, but ended marriages. I wasn't sure which bridge she meant, but it was probably one of the big ones. Suburban dialect has a way of replacing proper nouns with their most broad and simple counterparts. Probably the orange one. Charred meat and potato must was steamed into my clothes. Erin chomped a green apple and instructed me where to find towels and which shower I should use. I tried not to look at the spot where I'd painted the angel when I passed through the dining room. The sisters bickered about whose turn it was to put away the dishes, and I trounced off to shower. I wasn't sure if it would be harder to sleep with her or come clean. I'd begun to crave her touch rather than fear it. Emily was beneath my feet in the kitchen, pleading with Erin to not get involved. Not with someone who works for you. The help. Erin's pastel comforter rippled on the bed, yanked up almost square. Her rushed way to pretend the bed was made. I leafed through a book of short stories on the bedside table. The first page of The Nightingale and the Rose was creased at the top as a bookmark. There were used towels in every corner of the bathroom, and the toothpaste sat on the edge of the sink with the cap off. "I have a confession," Erin said over the shower door. I shoved the curtain aside, and she was wearing a faded black t-shirt with a giant paint stain. "Me too. Let me dry off, and you can go first," I said. I buckled the towel extra tight before coming out. I pulled a pillow up onto my lap and looked around the room to make sure there wasn't anything heavy enough for her to beat me to death. Erin sat down on the floor next to the bed with good greasy hair. We sat in silence for a few moments. "Don't get me wrong. Whatever this is, it's going well, but I super regret taking you to my meeting. It's all I think about, all day, every day. I'm sick about it." "Why?" "Because what the fuck kind of start is that? It's like I'm trying to keep you away. I'm sure that's what was wrong the other night. I'm so sorry. It's my fault." "Do you think that you deserve to be alone?" I said. She was rocking back and forth, sullen. "In a way, I feel like I'll never pick well. My first crush was O.J. Simpson." I laughed, then she laughed. Her fingers went to her nose, and she held back snot. "It's unfair," Erin continued. "When you're young, your mom tells you, the movies tell you, songs tell you that the heart wants what the heart wants. It's bullshit. It's a choice." I slumped towards her. "Did you have a choice when you did what you did? Was there any other option?" "There's always a choice, Alex. But right then, it was him or me. I chose me." "Before things got bad, did you know where they were headed?" This was the honest moment I fantasized about, going the way I never could imagine. "Absolutely. But hope is the stickiest shit. You can't shake it off. It's something you have to have taken from you. What about you?" Her voice thickened up. "Have you ever loved the wrong woman?" My body became hollow. I felt myself caving in. "Yes," I said. "And what did you do? Did you get out, or did you die trying?" "I don't remember." "Oh, God," she wiped her eyes. "I can't stop with the dysfunction. I used to be normal, I swear." A moth flapped under the lampshade. "You're a mess." I picked up an empty water bottle off a table and shook it at her. "And you're so messy." "We don't make any sense, do we, Alex?" "I don't know. Maybe we do. In spite of everything, I care about you a lot. Besides, I'm just as fucked up. All I can do is hope that when it's all out there, that you understand." I was ready to tell her everything. She truly meant something to me. I couldn't stand the thought of being with her under false pretenses. It was wrong. My entire life was wrong. But this kind of deviousness makes a man want to kill himself. The words were ready to come out of my mouth. I set out to physically hurt someone, not be some sort of sneaky quasi-rapist. Erin was right. She was going to have to take the hope I held for her. Courage was building in the silence, and I was weighing just how to deliver the message so she wouldn't immediately vomit. As I thought, she fired up from the floor and forced herself into me. "There's another empty bottle on your bookshelf. Don't think I don't see it," I said, avoiding her open mouth. Her nails anchored into the tops of my shoulders. "There's something I need to tell you." Legs wound around mine, like a grappler holding down her opponent to strike. She raked her nails across my chest. "Seriously." "Shut up," she said. She took control. I forgot what I was going to say. I forgot how bad I felt. I forgot what she'd done to John. I only knew what she did to me. I loved it. All of it. The bed was empty when I woke up, save for a few mashed pillows. I turned onto my stomach and saw a picture of Erin's family leering at me from the vanity. "We see you. So will she." Emily and her mom, the blondes, on one side of the photo, and Erin with her dad's arm around her shoulder on the other. The footsteps that rushed up the stairs made the empty can of diet soda on the glass nightstand buzz. "Get your lazy ass up," Erin said. She pulled the blanket off my stomach, and a wave of coffee breath curled my toes. I liked the smell of coffee when it brewed, but not when it breathed. Coffee made me gag. Tea the same way. My body felt patronized by the comfort of a warm beverage and fought them back up. Why? The blanket hung up on my heart where Erin's nails had broken the skin. A few shallow red lines and a blood bubble were scratched near my collarbone. I told you, I wanted eggs. We're going to get eggs. In the garage, 2 mountain bikes were mounted on the back of the car. Both had worn tires and splatters of hardened mud kicked up on the frames. She rode a set of nearby trails with Mike on occasion, but that wasn't what intimidated me. It was the high crossbar on both frames. We were both clad in purple shorts and white t-shirts. I told her I wasn't going anywhere until she changed. She called me stupid and started the car. I hope you can keep up, she said. That's how I felt about everything. I was a bobsled captain who hadn't studied the course, and my life felt like I was flying down an ice chute, trying to anticipate an endless series of turns. I hoped the inevitable crash didn't hurt, that I was put out of my misery quickly. Where are we going? I said. That was my other mantra. Where am I going? We're killing birds, she said and plopped a bike on the ground while I stood there like a moron. Her tiny arm muscles puffed when she grabbed the second bike underhand. We were in a marina's parking lot, and over Erin's shoulder was the enormous orange bridge that everyone called Golden. What? I'd already fallen behind. You get to go over the Golden Gate, and I get to have the best eggs Benedict in the world. I hate hollandaise, I said. Then have pancakes, dummy. Now keep up. She kicked her leg over the bike and took off towards the water. I followed as best I could. She weaved in and out of wandering tourists on bikes with handlebar baskets filled with maps and sunscreen. My bike wasn't a rental. I felt superior. I had places to be, even though I didn't know where I was. The great orange span and its stepladder supports got closer as we passed through the Presidio's gardens and neared the old military base that led up to the bridge. The bridge began as a little thing I could squish in my fingertips, but once we were below its incredible pillars, I was overcome by the mass. Erin shifted down with rapid clicks and stood up on her heels to pump up the steep hill that led to the sidewalk. She torqued the bike back and forth, and her legs alternated between slack and taut. Erin looked back with a smile and pressed forward. My legs gave out halfway up, and she was waiting for me at the top, drinking water from her backpack. Lots of people were there, taking a break in the gravel alcove that overlooked the bridge. They stood arm in arm and took photos with the stringed instrument of the gods behind them. You're doing good, she said. I put my arm around her hip and stuck my thumb into her wet waistband. We panted and stared out through the cables into the open way. The sun was halfway up the sky and created a giant cone of whitewashed water with its glare. The tip of the reflection pointed right between us. I pulled her hip a little closer, daring the force of a dying star to try and rip us apart. It's mostly downhill from here. Watch your speed, she said. We had the momentum, and if we could get going fast enough, maybe we could keep this thing rolling. Be careful, she said. On the other side of the bridge, it's really downhill. Like, you could die if you aren't careful. We pedaled slowly through the interchange and followed the signs to cross the far side of the bridge. Each side went a different direction, so there was no chance some asshole on a road bike would come barreling the opposite direction and eject you off the side. As a kid, my family used to go up to the northern tip of Michigan and walk all 5 miles of the Mackinac Bridge on Labor Day. Uncle Dave hated it with a passion and cursed the whole way. He swung his arms in an indignant power walk, and I kept up with him to hear him say hateful things about his wife and my other relatives. He told me if I jumped off the bridge, the water would feel like concrete, and that every year they fished suicides out and couldn't identify them because they didn't have any skin. He said that if he had to do it again next year, he was going to jump. He said this every year. Erin and I moved underneath the great cantaloupe suspender as it climbed to the top of the first gate. Cars fired by, moving the opposite direction, and no matter how softly I pedaled, I felt like I was traveling at the speed of light. My hair bounced in the wind, and the exhaust fumes swirled around me. We dodged around the first tower, and Erin pulled into an empty pop-out so we could admire the open ocean. Passing bikes whooshed refreshing wind up our sweaty backs. There was a cargo ship passing below. The flat deck was full of green and blue and red rusted boxes, and we stood at the edge, the furthest west we could get. At the end of the world was our beginning. Sticky and happy, I pinned down the back of Erin's shirt, which fought itself up in the breeze. I kissed her with hope and hurt and certainty. She kissed me back the same way. On the other side of the bridge, the path ringed and wound down at a dangerous angle. The bike's chain buckled and brakes hissed. I'd let go for a second and lurch forward until fear of the water unwrapping my flesh stayed my hands back to the brakes. It was a long ride up the canyon and then a smooth glide back down into the sloped town. It looked handmade, the way all the houses and shops were perched up on the hill and gave way at the water. The restaurant wasn't called Sausalito, and I was glad I hadn't mentioned it. It was the town itself. A lemming mob wandered the galleries on the shoreline, and we rode on and climbed a final hill to our hidden destination. Erin got eggs Benedict, and I got pancakes, the best I ever had. I don't remember how they tasted.
With and Without You, page 117. Falling in love is such an appropriate phrase. It starts with a like, and after a while that gains some momentum and you begin to stumble. The faster you go, the more scared you get, and before you know it, whack! Your face smashes into the ground and you're dizzy and tingly and in love. It's actually cornier than every rom-com makes it out to be. It's sillier. At least that's how it was for me. John was my first real love, and even though it was brief and tragic, it's all the evidence I need to know that it's a reason for being, the reason. There's no terror love can't quell. Love of a man, a parent, a sibling, love of life itself. These are better reasons to persevere than any I've found. We're designed to give and receive love. It's what brings us together, to make more people. John was my first real love, and even though it was brief and tragic, it's all the evidence I need to know that it's a reason for being, the reason. There's no terror love can't quell. Love of a man, a parent, a sibling, love of life itself. These are better reasons to persevere than any I've found. We're designed to give and receive love. It's what brings us together to make more people and continue the wonderful human experiment. I remember the exact moment I fell in love with John, when I saw stars and felt like I'd hit my head. We'd only been dating a few weeks when he asked me to go to a wedding with him. This was a big step. It wasn't a fun wedding where you get together with all your friends. It was a family wedding where there'd be parents and siblings and crotchety grandmother who'd want me to put more clothes on, no matter how conservative my outfit. It was early fall, a seaside wedding on the Atlantic coast. John's first cousin was marrying his high school sweetheart. His cousin was the pride of the family for being a major league hopeful. I found that funny. Even in a family where most everyone was financially successful, they all loved the guy who made a few $100 a week playing baseball because he was doing something that they could tell people about. Nobody brags that their brother is really big into material science and is making progress toward inventing plastic that doesn't add itself to the big choking continent of swirling refuse in the Pacific. It was the first weekend I'd taken off work in over a year. I remember packing during the day on Friday and feeling guilty I wasn't going to be there for service at the busiest time of the week. My suitcase was filled with every dress I owned. I didn't know these people. I didn't know what the vibe was going to be, so I prepared for every possible contingency. John got to my place after lunch, and it was a beautiful 2-hour drive to Virginia Beach. Sometimes the best part of a trip is being stuffed into a car with someone. There aren't any distractions. No phones or laptops, only the buzz of the tires on the highway and music, if you can agree on it. John talked the whole time, and it was wonderful. He told me about every family member I was going to meet, what schools they went to, which one of their children disappointed them the most. It's especially nice to hear about someone's family when you're going to put a face to the name in the matter of hours. John didn't seem nervous to introduce me to his family. "They'll like you," he said. "What you do is interesting and you're good at it." "They don't know that," I told him. "Oh, yes, they do. You seem like you can do anything. That's how they'll know you're good." That comment really stuck with me. On the one hand, it was shitty, but I know the feeling of seeing a sidewalk artist who is homeless and immediately assuming the art is bad because they don't look like they are capable of something great. I'm not proud of it, but it's a gut reaction, something I can't control and I think many people can empathize with. If I was some random girl who cooked for a living to get by, then that wouldn't be anything special, nothing to commend. But if you love a career and are passionate about it, that is something you can talk about. John's parents were in the lobby bar when we got to the hotel. They were so sweet. "You must be the beautiful chef we've heard so much about," his mom Victoria said to me, ignoring her son. She smelled like rosemary and lavender when she darted in for an unsuspecting hug. I thought the atmosphere would be stuffy the way John was so proper and judgmental, but everyone in the family was warm and loving. It was a mixed bag of people, just like any other wedding, all walks of life. There was even that random cousin in jean shorts at the reception who never ventured more than a few steps from the bar. The hotel was on the beach. Late Saturday night, John took my hand after we said goodnight to the old folks heading up to bed and led me down a long, reedy path to the sand. We kicked our fancy shoes under a bench and took a starlight stroll. My shoes aren't broken in very well. My feet ache, John said to me. He hopped when a cool wave washed up over his toes. You should have taken them off like the girls. The bride and groom were on their game and had a bucket of cheap flip-flops next to the dance floor so that as soon as everyone was drunk, the high heels got traded for something less stylish but more comfortable. A man should never wear flip-flops unless he's on a boat. Even then it's iffy. He kicked water at me. Besides, you don't know where they've been. Get your feet in the water. The salt might kill whatever got on your feet. The yellow moon was almost full and low on the horizon. The water looked like it was topped with a thin sheet of glowing glass. Truth or dare, I said, being silly. Oh, I'm not playing any games with you. Remember what happened when we tried to play spades with Tim and Margot? They were giving each other signs. You didn't see it, I did. We giggled as the lights from the hotel became a tiny candle in the distance. Truth or dare? John asked me. Dare, I said. I dare you to jump in. My dress was down before he finished his sentence, and I bounded into the water in my underwear, knees high to keep from falling. It was chilly, and the adrenaline rush erased the wine from the reception. John laughed as the water got taller, and I tripped headlong into the shimmering black pool. He shook his head at me and put his jacket around my shivering body. John hesitated for a second before letting it touch my skin. I could hear him calculate in his mind whether or not the salt would do anything to his sport coat. Truth or dare, I said. We turned back towards the hotel, and my sequined dress was over John's far shoulder. Truth. Why are you so pretentious? I was expecting this to be so stuffy the way you are. He let out a huff and gave me a wry grin. Is that how you see me? Absolutely. You asked if there were a tray of crudité at the happy hour. Words have specific meanings. Someone needs to respect that. You smell your wine way longer than you should before you drink it. How about that? I said. He laughed. I always thought of myself as particular. Let me think about it. We jerked our feet through the sand, making sure we didn't get back to the hotel too quickly. My family didn't always have money, you know. I'm the oldest, the firstborn by 5 years. Mom and Dad earned every penny they have. They lived the real American dream where you build a business and a life together and are successful. The two of them spent years fabricating signs for businesses with their own hands in our garage. He welded and installed, she painted and handled the paperwork. That was before all the secretaries and assistants and franchises. It was just them, and had they not been a perfect match, it wouldn't have been possible. I bet they weren't around a lot. They were never far away. All that time I was sleeping, they were building a future for me in the garage. One Christmas, I was probably 5, we had a tree and there were a few presents for me, but I was a greedy little child who wanted to snoop. One night I got curious and surreptitiously went my way downstairs after my parents went to bed and peeked into the overflowing stockings on the mantel. He paused. And they were full of potatoes. By the time Christmas came, mine had a few bits of candy and maybe some socks, but I'll never forget that feeling, knowing that Mom wanted to give me the illusion of bounty to try and make Christmas special. They told me that they would open their gifts later, but I knew all they had were vegetables. John opened his wallet and picked a white folded sheet from behind a credit card. He opened it, and it was a picture of a russet potato. This is why I want all the best things in life. I don't want them handed to me. I want them because I am going to go out and get them. I expect so much from the people around me because of this potato. Because every day I strive for real bounty and not some illusion. I don't ever want to have to pretend. Right then, right there, I fell in love.
Chapter 25. Charlie didn't tell me he'd given up the battle with his hairline. I didn't recognize his bald head when it popped out of the cab in front of my house. His tan was uneven, top of his skull much darker than his face. Charlie was stocky and powerful like the bears he chased around the woods. Nice digs. I thought it was expensive out here, Charlie said after a joyous hug. He slung a yellow backpack over his shoulder. Don't get too excited. I rent the basement. We walked through the back garden. I smell weed, Charlie said. Charlie was always trying to get people high. He wanted to be liked. It's what made him beta friend material. That's Annie. It's her house. Annie spent half her time gardening and the other half getting wasted. Sometimes she did them together. She had a foam stool for protecting her knees while digging, and I'd found her passed out in the yard a few times, resting her head on it as a pillow. Can we get some from her? We gotta get turnt tonight. What the fuck is turnt? That's what the kids say now. How the hell do you know that? Did a beaver tell you? Dude, I sit around on my phone all day. The park has better Wi-Fi than most coffee shops. The woods are super dense. The forest floor is all thick and squishy. People lose the trail all the time and have to call for help. Charlie threw his bag on the couch. So what do you have planned for this weekend? Tonight we're going out with a few friends. It's a nice place. I hope you brought something to wear. Can I wear jeans? Of course. Not sure one of my shirts will fit you, though. Whiskey and steaks, I hope. I'm sure they'll have steak. It might be a bunch of courses, though. I've never been there. And why the balls are we going? Man, it's not like you need a jacket and tie. This guy who works there did something very bad. We're gonna punish him. Fuck yeah, what's the plan? Charlie's face lit up and he rubbed his hands together. I rummaged through the fridge, thinking about how to approach this tactfully. Step 1, I said, and threw him a beer. We get turnt. Mike's tour bus pulled in front of the house at 7. It was a decent hike to Red Apple, but we had a mobile bar to keep us occupied. A young Hispanic girl in a baseball cap was driving. She cheered along with the guys as Charlie and I stepped in. The first step to making the night great is exclaiming how great it will be. Tonight, the canned cheering had an electric undertone. We weren't hoping to find trouble. I was on a mission to create it. Mike brought a Navy friend named Justin, a career guy who had pleats in his jeans and lived down in San Diego. Did you tell them about the one in Denver? Justin said. Mike wore tight, fashionable clothes with patterns I'd never dare. He wasn't showing off for girls. Once you pass the minimum physical threshold for women, it doesn't matter how sleek your body gets. Women can tell if they want to sleep with you through a winter coat and snow pants. Those veins on his arms and softball shoulders were a message to men. I'm better than you. I don't talk about that shit, Mike said. Come on, man. I always loved your work stories, Justin said and then looked at Charlie and me. You won't regret this. I'll give you some fucking work stories, Charlie said. No way they're this good. Fine. So I worked as a mortician in the Navy, he began. There's not a lot of us. How'd you get into that? Charlie asked, confused. Mike was embarrassed about what he did. His voice got soft, so we huddled up like we were sitting around a campfire. Charlie and I were already drunk and trying to hide it with quiet voices. I went to mortuary school because my family owns funeral homes. One day, a body gets reeled in, and it's so fat they have to use 2 rolling tables to get the poor bastard inside. I was praying we didn't have a viewing for this guy because my partner was this tiny Korean, and it was hard enough for us to move regular bodies around. I thought the military had fitness tests, I said. The Navy is responsible for contractors and foreign nationals, all different kinds of people, not just sailors. We took turns pulling from a nasty bottle of cinnamon-flavored whiskey. Thankfully, it wasn't a burial. It was a cremation. Earlier that week, we had a new crematory installed, a high-power unit to cut down on burn time. There are rules about how burned a body has to be, legally, so the more power the better. The install guys tested it, but I hadn't used it. It took 6 people to get this lumpy bastard in the kiln. He was thickest in the center, so we slid his feet in first and then kneaded and punched down his gut with all 12 hands to get him through the doorway. As a joke, someone said we should have trussed him up like a pig. Once we shoved him in, I turned on the heat. A few minutes later, all these alarms and buzzers are going off, and we weren't totally familiar with this equipment, so my partner and I had no idea what it meant, other than it wasn't good. It was hundreds of degrees too hot, and molten fat was leaking out of the cracks of the door. I cut the power off, but the heat kept rising. I couldn't believe this is what Mike did for a living. We were dumbfounded, but hanging on his every word. There was nobody on the base to help, Mike continued. I couldn't open the door to spread out the heat because the boiling fat was eating through the floor, and it would be like cutting a bigger hole in the top of a volcano. I was afraid we were going to get trapped behind a flame wall. The brick in the oven could have cracked and burned the whole goddamn building down. I ran and called the manufacturer. A guy named Cookie answers the phone with a thick southern drawl. Drips of fat are sizzling on the tile in one ear, and Cookie was in the other, calmly telling me that when the body started to burn, all the melting fat and cellulite created a bubbling pool of grease. It didn't matter that the oven was off. There was a mountain of fuel inside. He said to call the fire department just in case it went up, and get some twine next time, and truss that body up like a Sunday roast. Cook it nice and even like. Mike paused for a second. So what do you do, Charlie? Charlie was usually the guy with interesting work stories. He had a lot of stupid ones, too, about nature's power or beauty or whatever new age philosophical shit he was into. In between the redundancies and the proselytizing, there were moments of insight. I'm a warden at a state park in Oregon, Charlie said. That's really cool, Justin said. My main job is to keep people from getting eaten by bears. Anyone ever die on your watch? No, a few people have been attacked, and a bunch deserve to die, but they were lucky that the bears they wanted pictures of weren't hungry. Mike went into the back and pulled out a plastic container full of gummy candy that smelled like Annie's couch. I took it from his hands and held it up like a proud best man at the end of his speech. Haven't had a night out with the guys in a long time. To friendships old and new. Turn, Charlie said and snatched the candy. We bobbled up the highway, exchanging stories and hoping the pot gummies would hit us soon. I revised tales about me and Charlie from college that left out our other friends. I did it to make Charlie feel good and hopefully prevent some drunken breakdown with John this and John that. Also, I had to keep the conversation away from the present. Mike knew too much and Charlie too little. Charlie, shit, man, how many of those did you eat? Mike asked. A dozen or so, he said. They're only 10 milligrams each, right? Mike laughed in his face. Maybe that pushy shit you get up north. Those are 50s, brother. Dude, Charlie begged. That's so much. Am I going to be all right? Boys, we came to start some shit, and now we have a wrecking ball, Mike said as the bus stopped. Dude, guys, should I throw up? We get tested, so I don't know anything about edibles. Did he eat a lot? Justin asked. Guys, seriously, am I going to die? Mike and I glanced at each other. I didn't have a plan, and for the first time in my life, I was all right with it. Chapter 26. Red Apple was in an old barn with copper slapped on the roof to make it look cultured. The four of us walked a romantically lit cobblestone path to the front and were seated immediately. Why are we fucking with this chef guy? Charlie said. His head was starting to bobble, consciousness wandering off. I cut Mike off when he tried to answer Charlie's question. Mike and I met because we both know these girls. I'll bet you do, Charlie said, and then made what he thought was a party noise with his mouth, but came off like a strange howl that made the people near us uncomfortable. Charlie, focus. So we know these girls, and they own a restaurant, and the chef of this restaurant smeared them online. Anonymously, too, Mike said. This cat has no fucking honor. We aren't paying for this meal, I said in a low voice, but don't make it obvious. Stick to blended scotch. The dining room was busy, servers bustling from table to table. The walls were lined with hatch cedar wine bottle holders, some with narrow slats and single bottles, other with wide baskets that held cases in each scoop. How you feeling, Charlie? Mike's boring friend, whose name I'd already forgotten, said. Charlie nodded and held his rocks glass up to his nose. Can I tell you guys a secret? Charlie said. I don't think it's possible that I'll ever be able to stand up again. The fear was taking hold. Our waiter had a mechanical nature, like he read books on how to get people to like him. He did everything right, but it seemed wrong, scripted. How do you want to play this? Mike said. I was thinking about yanking out a nest of pubic hair in the bathroom and then putting it on the plate, but now that I say it out loud, it sounds stupid. I can do it, Charlie whispered with his ear to the table. Carry me to the potty, and I'll get you pubes. Carry me, Alex. Carry me. I'm shaved, Mike said. You? I'll rip a fistful out. You want to do it here? Charlie said, barely audible. He grabbed the bottom of his chair and raised his brows all the way up. He looked like he was in the back seat of a fighter jet, pulling maximum G-force. Pretty much. I need that optical illusion, I said. Who's your girl, Alex? Can I meet her? How many pubes you want? Jesus Christ, Charlie, get your hand out of your pants. Whatever you do to the food, you need to make a scene, Mike said. We ordered a nice Italian blend, and Mike gave a lesson to the uninitiated on how the wine snobs smell the berries and moss and shit in the wine. He tilted a glass perpendicular to the floor with a tablespoon of red in the bottom and had both guys smell the strong scent of alcohol at the top and then work their way around to the heavy sniff of fruit at the bottom. This was arcane trickery to Charlie, who left his steak untouched as he scraped his nose up and down the glass, making the same discovery each time for the first time. His eyes glassed over, and he couldn't sit up straight or talk. I can't think of anything better. We have to send him, Mike said, motioning to Charlie. He bugged his eyes when he looked at him, not knowing why. I escorted Charlie to the bathroom because he slapped things out of strangers' hands when he was stoned. At least he did when he was younger. Guys tend not to age outside of their friendships. The moment you come back together with a true friend, you revert to the age you were when you were last together. Or maybe not. Maybe Charlie was an adult now and he didn't do that, but I didn't want to get thrown out until we had a story, something we could photograph and talk about. Jamie's claims were unverified. We needed this to be ironclad. In the back hallway there were 3 unisex bathrooms. Each had a series of 3 cutouts blazed across the door in polished steel. The silhouette on the left was a woman in a dress, a man on the right, and in the middle was a hybrid of the two. It annoyed me. I wasn't sure why. I gave Charlie a gentle push into the open room and waited in the hallway. He was instructed to hand me a folded piece of toilet paper with some pubic hair, but instead he burst forth with his hands shoved way down in his pockets and wouldn't look at me when he sped back to our table. I couldn't believe he knew where it was. Charlie's plate was still untouched when he sat down. I shrugged at the group. Charlie slapped his hands up on the table and donned a sadistic grin. He picked up a steak knife and split the fatty ribeye in half. Then he dug a hole in the center of one side and took something from his lap and squished it in the bloody channel. Mike looked at me. His friend looked at me. Then we all looked at Charlie. He sucked up some air, took a pensive look towards the sky, and let out a flutter of aching wails, his fists pounding both sides of his plate. It was genius on his part not to tell us what he was going to do, because the 3 of us were in legit shock when the nearest waitress came to help us with whatever the hell was wrong. All of us stared at her, helpless. Charlie pounded harder, his face bright red and spitting. 2 waitresses and a waiter were now at the table, one trying to calm Charlie and the others asking if he had a medical condition. Once he had the audience's attention, Charlie settled himself. He took his fork from beside his plate, dug and tugged at the edge of his steak, and out popped a used tampon. The cotton was caked with dark, dried blood, and then glossed with the fresh blood from inside of the meat. I gagged. He shot his eyes toward me, to let me know he was still there. He was hyper-inebriated, but he wasn't gone yet. The waitress peered over his shoulder and ran away shrieking with the plate held out as far as she could from her body. Soon our table was being cleared by black aprons, and apologies were coming from every direction. Nearby diners got up and walked out. Charlie excused himself to the restroom, and I stood up, hoping to draw the attention of whatever manager was going to come to try and explain what had happened. I heard the purposeful click of her heels behind me before she got to the table. The manager's name was Audrey, and she looked like one. I heard her legs sharply crossing in front of one another, the closer she got, a panicked strut. The table next to us was now empty. I set my hand on top of one of the chairs and aligned my posture with my outrage. She sputtered apologies at me. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, "but I'd like to speak with the chef. We need an explanation." Of course, she said. A few minutes later, Audrey's heels clacked behind me again. Jamie followed in a double-breasted white jacket and checkered pants. The instant he saw me, a rage line formed across his forehead. Before I could get the corners of my lips up in a smile, I was on my back. Jamie was on top of me, flailing. Mike flipped Jamie onto his back with a single-handed shove and held him to the ground with a pointed finger. I shimmied over to Audrey to catch her. She looked like she was about to faint. Far behind her was Charlie, standing behind a potted plant and peering at us through the leaves. His hands were covering his ears, and his knees were bent, like an explosion was about to go off. Chapter 27. I was outraged, appalled, confused, then offended. The man in the funny pants might have injured me. I can't tell. I might be overserved. "Call the police." "No, an ambulance." "No, the governor," I said to Audrey. She took me seriously, even when I laid it on extra thick and held my arm to my head in a dramatic swoon. The kitchen staffers peeled Jamie back into the restaurant's bowels while he threw out wild accusations of sabotage. The diners that hadn't left held their phones up or down or whichever way they needed to disseminate texts and sounds and video. Audrey yammered an endless loop of apologies. Mike suggested we not get the law involved, that the evening had been unpleasant enough. We agreed to leave peacefully if Audrey promised to get to the bottom of this, so it never happened to anyone else. And for fuck's sake, Audrey, you have to fire that chef. "I hate the taste of blood," I said, wiping my face. "I let him hit you once," Mike said. Charlie was pulling on his tongue with both hands like it was a paper towel holder. He hadn't said anything in over an hour. "Why?" I said. "I felt bad for the guy." Erin buzzed in my pocket while we celebrated with more drinks. I knew her cadence, a few sparse words that built into a fervor when I didn't reply. The rhythm of an angry woman transcends all mediums. A phone call, a text message, their face across the room. You know. A man lunges and swings. A woman pokes, and then at the perfect moment, she explodes. Gettin' turnt, Charlie rambled, the edible fear loosening its grip. Chuck, slow down, man. It's a long ride back. Mike took the bottle from his paws. Erin continued to peck at my pocket, but I ignored her. I asked the driver to take us to a bar down the street from Essen, a friendly place that wouldn't refuse to serve us as long as we could hold up our heads. Getting drunk after work was as much a part of a shift in the kitchen as dicing an onion. Erin would be right down the street. I had to be careful, carry half a beer everywhere, spit shots back into bottles, and maintain something like sobriety. I opened another beer. The Union was a college bar. We'd go there on weeknights to drink $2 beers and eat salty popcorn from a filthy machine. Big John, the door guy, slouched on a stool outside the patio gate. He motioned Mike and me with a flick of his chin. Charlie held me back as the others went inside. I want to show you something, Charlie said. He held his phone out like a compass and spun around 3 times. He walked to the end of the street and looked east, took a few steps, walked back to the curb, then looked west. Come over here, he said. Charlie put his arm around me, and I thought he might need a gutter to puke in, so I steadied us on the curb above a sewer grate. You see that building down there? He faced the long brick and steel row of storefronts, one of which was Essen. Some of them open, others closed. I had no idea what he was asking me to look at. She's right there. Now I knew exactly what he meant. Who? Alex. I found that stupid cunt. She's in your fucking backyard and you didn't even know it. Found who, Charlie? That horrible bitch that killed John. He concentrated on what sobriety was left in his body to be lucid in this moment. The big reveal. I thought I might have to stop him right then, that he'd go bombing down the street with a broken beer bottle and try and slash her throat. He was pure sodium and water, a violent reaction that didn't make any sense. I'll do it right now if you want, he said, with his arm around me. I don't. We're too fucked up to try and talk about this now. I grabbed his wrist. Let's go try and have some fun. We'll deal with this tomorrow. An hour later, the table was full of empty glasses. Even though I'd abandoned sobriety, I could still see the smudges on the rims. The legs underneath us were uneven. The table knocked and clanked every time somebody moved. I bought round after round to try and kill the night. It swerved away from me, and I was trying to beat everyone's memory of it to death. Once we got right in the morning, I talked sense into Charlie. I could give him a speech about growing up, moving on, send him back into the forest with the rest of the beasts to think about heavier things. Hey Mike, hey Mike, hey Mike. Charlie pinched his fingers and tried to grasp his attention with his hands. Yeah, man? You think what we did back there was right? Did that chef guy get what he had coming? Charlie said. He swayed left and right. I stared at the reflection of my nose in the red light bulb above the table. I wasn't sure we went far enough until he attacked Alex. We have a history with that guy. Charlie's trying to ask if you believe in revenge, I said to everyone. To moderate the discussion, Charlie started. I believe in revenge if the target hasn't paid for what they've done, Justin said. That's subjective, Mike said. Charlie's eyes got darker. He hunched himself up on the table, and the glasses slid towards him. Alex and I had a conversation about this a long time ago. Charlie paused. I mashed his foot 4 times to make him think before speaking. I said revenge is an obligation if the crime goes unpunished. Alex agreed. I don't think the same way anymore, I said. How can you say that after tonight? Mike asked. Vengeance isn't worth it if it doesn't change anything. Tonight that asshole might get fired because he blabbermouthed a bunch of lies. He learned his lesson. He shouldn't do that. There's change, so it's worth it. Charlie, Mike said. I think I know what you're getting at. Me too, said Justin. I kicked Charlie in the shin with the back of my heel. His knees bounced into the table, and 2 pint glasses shattered on the floor. You've got 2 servicemen here. If you want to talk about war, let's do it. I ran off to the bar and ordered 4 shots of Irish whiskey with a beef broth back, hot from the French dip sandwich they served. Wait, Charlie said. 1 or 2 more drinks, and he'd be gone. War is a type of revenge. Someone usually starts it by doing something they shouldn't. Justified war, maybe. What percentage of wars are justified? Justin said. They bantered back and forth while Charlie gulped vowels at them and then nodded when they hit on something he agreed with. By the time the lights came up and the bartender rang the bell for last call, Charlie was passed out in the corner of the booth, slid down so his chin was even with the table. Mike and Justin came back from the bathroom together, hugging it out. I tried to pull Charlie up out of his seat. "Girls are coming to get us," Mike said to me. I dropped Charlie face first onto the floor, his hips and legs balanced up on the booth. "Erin's coming here?" "Yeah, bus went home. They're meeting us out front to pick us up." "I live too far out of the way. Charlie and I can catch the last train in 20 minutes. "How?" "We'll run." "He can't fucking walk." Don't wake up. Don't wake up. Don't wake up. Charlie clung to me like a pet monkey in front of the bar, with the rest of the tangled mob in need of something or someone to get home. He had an oval of drool puddled on his shirt. Erin pulled up first, and then Emily right behind her. Justin trotted off with some other friends, while Mike and I loaded Charlie into the back of the car like a gutted deer. He kicked and shuffled until his hands were a pillow underneath his ear and he was comfy. Mike yelled a thanks to Erin, and I slid into the front seat. Erin's knuckles were white, and the leather on the wheel creaked as she squeezed. "Erin, this is Charlie. Charlie, this is Erin," I said. "Nice to meet you, Erin," I said in a high falsetto. Charlie wouldn't know me right now, let alone the girl. "Why the fuck haven't you answered my texts all night?" "Guys' night. No bitches." She slapped her palm into my chest and I caught it, then kissed the top of her hand. 1 to 10. How drunk are you?" 2, I lied. "Times 4? We passed the last streetlight on our way out of town, and the clear sky exploded with stars. "That sounds about right. Tell me what happened with Jamie." "So Charlie went to the bathroom to pull out some crotch hair, but they were unisex, so he got back to his steak, exceptional knife work, and—" "What the fuck happened?" she said. Erin slammed on the brakes, and I chuckled when I heard Charlie's body roll off the back seat and hit the floor. The stern look on her face snapped a bit of sobriety into me. "We put a used tampon in Charlie's steak, then Jamie punched me in the face." I rolled my lower lip down at her so she could see the fat part where it was split. "He tackled me in the middle of the dining room. Might got a picture for you." Charlie tried to claw his way up from the floor behind us. He grunted and scratched. "How drunk is he?" 34. "Did you talk to anyone? Say who you were or why you were there?" "Of course not. I gave the manager a fake name and she comped our meal if we agreed not to call the police." Erin's face transformed into one of relief, and she moved the car off the shoulder. The dashboard made a bing and then a bong, like the seatbelt wasn't latched. Charlie was silent again. All I had to do was kiss Erin goodnight, yank him out of the back seat, and drag him into the house. Sure, the stairwell to the basement was steep, but Charlie was compact, like a big bald piece of luggage. I could roll him down and blame his bruises on the booze. "Oh shit," Erin said. "My gas light. I don't know if the station near you leaves the pumps on, so I'll just stay with you and get gas in the morning. That way I can meet Charlie." "Fantastic." Chapter 28. I couldn't sleep, my head next to Erin's, next to Charlie's. Save for the wall between us, we were 6 inches from each other. I left Charlie face up on the couch, knowing if he choked on his own vomit while sleeping, my problems would be solved. I listened through the wall all night for labored breaths. A shoe was wedged under the bedroom door, so we couldn't wander in and smash Erin to death while I was asleep. My dresser was old and heavy. Charlie could do an awful lot of damage with one of the drawers before it splintered apart. The morning light crept up on the bed and meandered over Erin's toes. The nails had mushroom polish, and there was a big freckle on her right ankle. I laid there paralyzed as it wiggled and climbed over every wrinkle of the blanket, all the way up to her beaked chin. The tangerine light and shadow battled beneath her neck for a minute, before the sun conquered and moved on to turn her last wild strands of hair into glowing embers. I twirled at the bits flared out at funny angles, thinking this was the last time I'd ever get to be near her. She slept with her back to me, but hooked one foot around mine to keep us together. I had no idea how to maneuver her around the post-drunk watchman outside the door. Her face was carved into Charlie's memory. He couldn't so much as open his eyes. I was not optimistic. Zeke barked from the floor and scared me, not because he heard something, but because he wanted to let me know it was bullshit he wasn't on the bed. Erin shifted and the scum on her lips split and formed tiny white bars as she jawed up and down. The sun was risen. I had to make some attempt to get her out of the house. My first thought was to knock her out, sling her over my shoulder, and let her wake up at the ER. I'd tell her she fell out of bed. I paced the room for a bludgeon. The TV remote? Too light. The laptop? Too valuable. The lamp? Too noisy. When I jostled Erin's shoulder, it made a ting sound, like toasted glasses. I touched it again and realized it was the door handle behind me. The heel of the brown Oxford under the door was stomping up and down. Charlie smacked the door. "Where's the bathroom? Let me in." He smacked the door 3 more times. The only bathroom was through my bedroom, and Charlie would need to pee badly after a night of heroic drinking. I said nothing and hoped he would move the dishes aside and go in the sink, or trot outside and scare poor Annie to death pissing on her petunias. Erin flipped her eyes open and tried to catch up with what was happening. She grabbed at pillows and blankets to cover bare spots of skin. "Hang on a second," I said. I had no choice but to open the door. I stood as far away as I could. Charlie banged 3 more times. "Open the fucking door!" I pushed my butt back. Hamstrings burned with the stretch. I batted at the handle with sweaty fingers. Charlie fired into the room and took 3 giant steps before he began puking. Heavy chunks hit the bathroom linoleum, and Erin ripped the sheet up over her head, giggling. Charlie zombied out into the living room, mumbling for water when he was finished. "Hi, Charlie," Erin said. He grumbled. "He's a show-off drinker," I said. Erin swashed her bangs to the side. "I'm still mad at you." "I told you I'd get him back." More groans and splashes of water echoed in. "I don't care about that. It was the way you ignored me." Life was a lot easier when I was younger and avoided confrontation. I tucked my nose behind her ear and kissed at her neck. Sweet at first, then fat puckers that made her laugh and shove. "You were going to be mad either way. Don't act like you want me to be the guy fighting with his girlfriend at the dinner table with the guys. That guy sucks." "I wasn't aware I was your girlfriend." "I didn't mean to presume. I'll be whatever you want me to be." "Keep being complicated, Alex. I have to go. There are deliveries this morning, and one of my vendors has been hiding rotten eggplants in the bottom cases that don't get inspected. You guys should come by the restaurant tonight, if Charlie feels better. That'll be fun. Maybe he'll find something in the bathroom to put in your food." "You aren't funny when I hate you." Hate wasn't enough. She had to want me dead to be evenly in love. A wave of hot air helped Erin pull open the door, and on the 3rd stair, her footstep clicked in unison with Charlie's final hork hitting the kitchen sink. Charlie ran back into the bathroom. I filled a plastic cup with water and took it to him. His cheek was pressed against the toilet. "The cold is nice," he said. Charlie opened his mouth and waved me to tip the cup to his face. Water splashed up from the seat, and he gulped at the air like a goldfish who jumped out of the bowl. "I'll be fine in an hour," he said. "Let's go climb something." 2 hours later, we headed to Mount Diablo at Charlie's request. It was a grass hill covered with trees. The name didn't make any sense. At a few thousand feet tall, it took us an hour or 2 to get to the top. Charlie charged ahead while Zeke and I lagged behind, sniffing, peeing. The switchback trail to the summit was open and the sky the color of the Aegean Sea. The cobbled sandstone tower at the top looked like it was covered in gems as we climbed, the shine from the verdigris aging of the oxidized copper on the roof. At the top was a vantage point, and we gazed north into the scoop of the valley. "This is what I picture when I think of California," Charlie said. "They should change that to the state motto." "To what?" "California, the land of ridiculous expectations." "Tell me what you see out there." I saw food, rolling hills lined with artisans and farmers, growers who took great pride in what they made. I saw olives, grapes, avocados, cows with names, and little spotted pigs who ran happy in slopped forests. I saw the chutes and ladders and causeways that funneled it west towards the concrete heartbeat into my and so many other hands to decode from our little boxes of flame and freeze and every degree in between. Charlie looked back and forth at the other people on the peak as if they were listening in. "I have something to show you," he said, and started flipping through the map on his phone. He walked to the west ledge and pointed, eyes down at the screen. "There, right there," he pointed at the east bay, down towards the water somewhere. "What do you see?" "I see an abandoned prison, a hazy bridge, and a bunch of water with lions in it." "That's not what I see," Charlie said, and belly danced towards me. I see her. She's down there, Alex. I found her. I don't know if it was fate or chaos theory or dumb fucking luck at work that led Charlie to Erin. He was a talker. He'd blab with anyone about anything. And on his way here, he was blabbering at the airport about coming to the East Bay and, hey, have you ever been there? And, hey, where do you like to eat? A guy gave him a tapas bar. A girl gave him a wood-fired pizzeria. Those weren't going to impress Alex. So he flapped on until someone said they went to this German place, and it had a funny name, and I'm sure you could find it. And, oh, hey, the friend I'm going to see is German, and isn't that funny, and he would probably like that. Then 1 click, 2 clicks, and there she was on the screen in her gray linen apron, leaned sassy against the wall with her arms crossed and a chef's knife in her hand. My heart tumbled down the mountainside, and I wanted to chase it. Gravity was less consistent than Charlie, single-minded, a loyal arrow. He didn't want to do this only for John. He wanted it for me, too, to bring me a piece of her and wag his tail and get a pat on the head. Who? I said. Erin Rhodes, that cunt that killed John. His mouth changed. It moved in small yaps from his 4 front teeth instead of its normal gaping claps. He put his butt up on the wall and bounced the soles of his shoes off the stone facade. She deserves to die. We agreed if she was set free, she had to go. We agreed. I need your help. Charlie, I said, wavering, killing her won't change anything. You pulled back pretty hard last night, too. What the fuck is going on with you? I stepped to him and put my nose to his. I've grown up and learned that life isn't the sum of my assumptions. I paused. That it's hard to see someone for what they really are when you love them. So let's just give her a pass because you figured out the world is complicated and John wasn't perfect? Fuck that. She killed our best friend, Alex. He didn't hit her. He didn't rape her. She picked up a gun and killed him. Do you think that girl wanted to kill him? That John was the paragon of morality that his family's lawyers painted him to be? Who was he, Charlie? I loved him, but tell me who he really was. Not with you or with me, but with women. Charlie paced back and forth. He dug deep to bring me to his side. He was picky, he stammered. He was critical. He wasn't always nice to girls. Is that all? Don't let the hurt mask your memory. So the fuck what? He toyed with them. He was moody. He didn't deserve to be murdered because he was a dick. Because if that were the case, any woman could shoot any man. Because newsflash, we're all dicks. Even you, Mr. I Like Them All. The wind picked up and a colored pamphlet for the park flew from one stone wall to the next. The argument made a middle-aged couple in matched khaki shorts turn back before they got up the stairs. You can't stop me, he said. Oh, yes, I can. I said, but didn't know how to make it true. I had to make it true before I sent him back into the wilderness, where he bore witness to and preserved the savageness of nature. Before he flew north, he had to tell me she was safe, and I had to believe him. Otherwise, I was going to have to kill someone after all.
With and Without You, page 216. The end began on the toilet. I was sitting on top of it with the seat closed, desperate for information when John burst in and asked, "Is that my phone?" It wasn't right to go through his phone, especially for someone so fiercely private. I was looking for a way out, hard evidence that we should split. He'd become erratic and distant those last few weeks. I wanted to leave, but I needed justification. It's a tricky thing to leave someone you care about when you don't have any solid reason to give them. The lingering feeling that something is wrong bothers you, but it never forces your hand. I would come over right after work and get in the shower, and he'd close the door to his bedroom and go to sleep before I shut off the water. This is a type of abuse, but it's subtle, the way someone can undermine your feelings but not really do anything wrong. Mental tyranny like this is cumulative, like being in chronic pain. Sure, it doesn't hurt that much, but it adds up and eats at you and makes you act crazy. That's why I took his phone. John stood in the doorway and waited for an explanation, knowing whatever I said was going to be inadequate. I know this looks bad. I needed to know what was going on with you. He took me by the hand, pinching my thumb to my palm. I'm not sure how hard he grabbed. A chef's hands go through a lot and nothing seems to hurt them. This was the first time he'd ever lay a finger on me, but for some reason, I wasn't surprised. What's going on? He repeated. John shoved me onto the hallway floor. I was scared, but it made sense. He was such an intense person. He did everything with twice as much gusto as everyone else. Being angry shouldn't be any different. "Stop it," I begged, looking up at him. He was so much taller from the floor. This was the moment I understood we were different. It didn't matter if I had a knife, a board, a lifetime of self-defense classes. Nothing could keep that man from doing whatever he wanted to me. Impending doom ran through my veins, an icy reminder skittering inside me that this was the end of something. Maybe the relationship, maybe my life. I wasn't sure. "You aren't smart enough to lie to me, so don't try. If you're ferreting through my phone, that means you feel guilty. It means you want to justify something you've done. Tell me." He got on one knee and cupped the back of my neck. "What did you do?" I was on my back, propped up on rug-burnt elbows. My feet were nearest him, and my instinct was to bash him in the face with my heel and bolt out the front door, but I thought I could talk him down. "There's nothing to tell. You've been acting crazy. You are acting crazy." Eyes on fire, he collapsed on top of me while I fought. My fist deflected off his chest like waves break against giant stones. I shut my knees together, and he sprawled out with his full weight on top of me. "Crazy?" He batted my hands aside and rolled down onto the floor, cradling my neck. I closed my eyes and hoped that death wouldn't hurt, that it would take me far away in the arms of something beautiful, something constructed of pure light and love. The animal part of me wasn't ready to join with the light, and without thinking, I flipped over onto my stomach and tried to scurry out. John clasped the middle of his arm underneath my throat and set his knees on each side of my torso. This is what I'd later find out was called a rear naked choke. Every time John flexed his arm, my windpipe shut. I was unable to move, and he lectured me for what felt like hours, but was probably seconds. At the end of each monologue, he'd squeeze hard enough to keep me from catching any air for 10 or 15 seconds, and when he let go, I didn't dare open my mouth until I was sure he wanted me to. "I'm not going to hurt you, but you brought this upon yourself. If you aren't going to respect me, then I'm not going to respect you." He rose his voice to silence me if I tried to reason with him. "If we can't respect each other, then we can't love each other, so we have to respect each other. Close to perfect isn't good enough. We must be perfect, both of us, together." Again, no air. The light was sucked from my eyes, and the world became dark, hopeless. Each time he choked me, I went through the same process of dying. First, I'd fight to sneak in a little air, then I'd give up, and the darkness would come with nausea and pain and despair. Then, as the world went black, I'd accept that I was dead. The second I was certain I was gone, he'd let go, and my mind would fast-forward the world back into being. I must have died a dozen times before I figured out he wasn't going to kill me. "We are symbiotic. One can't exist without the other. Not anymore." After a while, I began to think that the choking was going to be the easy part. Maybe he was warming up his arms for something much, much worse. Too terrible to imagine. I lay silent and listened to him say hateful, evil things to me. Eventually, he got tired of talking, walked into his room, and closed the door. I didn't waste time crying on the carpet. I jumped up and ran out the front door without my shoes or purse. I made my way to a convenience store and used a stranger's phone to call my sister to pick me up. I didn't tell her what happened or why I didn't have shoes. I told her we were over and cried with my head on her lap all the way home. The next day I found myself in a sandwich shop with John, getting my purse and belongings, talking it out. He put his hand on my neck, stroking over and back. "Love, I know I was wrong. I know it, but there's not even a mark. Even when things go sideways and I lose control, I can't scar your skin. You'd know I never really hurt you, right?" He said this with so many other things. I let him talk and talk. Eventually, he wore me down. As sad as this sounds, the fact that he didn't kill me was one of the reasons I came back, one of the reasons I held on to hope. He could have hurt me a lot more than he did. He's obviously in control. He's got problems, but in control. I figured it was an episode, something to work out in therapy. Over the next week, my excuses became more convoluted. His medicine could have changed. A drug interaction with something he ate. Work stress, fear of success. Then it became my fault. I was the one who invaded his privacy. Tit for tat, I invaded his space, so he invaded mine. If I don't do that again, then I'll never have to be on the floor.
Chapter 29. Back at my house, it smelled like rain. The late afternoon sky was splattered with thin cloud puffs that each held a few glasses of water they refused to release. I sat Charlie down in the backyard at a white table surrounded by ugly painted stones. A decorative spot whose only purpose was to beg awes from Annie's bingo friends that sometimes came over for coffee. Charlie was as sticky from the hike as I was with panic. I set 2 glasses and the only bottle of booze I had, gin, in front of us. I retrieved Erin's book from under my bed and tossed it atop the unstable wire table. The pages were rippled and blue from the wiper fluid I'd once dunked it in. The gin tipped over and fell into the mulch. "Do you know about this?" I asked. "No, I didn't spill anything blue." "I meant the book itself." A window at the back of the house buckled a few times and then opened a crack. Annie stuck her face sideways and shouted through the hole. "You boys staying in for dinner?" I wagged the bottle at her. Mulch fell off the bottom, and she gave me a head toggle that would have been a nod if she were standing up straight. "What is that, rum?" "Gin," I replied. "Dry." "I'll make lemon squares. Save me a taste." Charlie crossed his arms and leaned back, unconvinced by whatever I was about to say. He had to vibrate some part of his body when irritated, which at that moment was his knee. "This book is a memoir of how Erin came to kill John," I said. "I tracked her down a year ago after I found out about it. I thought she was trying to profit on John's death. I went mad. I wanted to kill her. I know we said a lot of horrible things during the trial, but I didn't mean any of it. Not then. Some part of me knew that John wasn't guiltless in all this, but I refused to see it." Charlie stood up, rammed his palms into his face. "A fucking year?" he said. "Sit down." I poured him 3 inches of gin. "I went nuts. I was consumed with finding her and killing her myself. I stalked her restaurant and broke into her car while she was at work. I was going to strangle her, watch her die. I hid in the back seat, and when she got in, I snapped a zip tie around her throat. I was happy until I realized I was choking the wrong girl. Turns out it was her little sister. A drop of rain hit my side of the table, and then another splashed into my cup. Why didn't you tell me? Because if it had been you, that innocent girl would be at the bottom of a lake. Hate is multiplicative, Charlie. Together, it's far more intense than when we're apart. Why tell me now? You know I'm not going to read her fucking lies. No, I'm going to read it to you, and you're going to listen. And if I don't? I stood. A shock tensed every muscle in my body. I'll tape you to that goddamn chair if I have to. I eased back and Charlie wiped rain from his cheek that might have been tears. The book was filled with sticky notes to mark passages I'd read and reread. I leafed through my highlights and gave his fractional attention span small bites of text. He stopped me a few minutes in. How do you know any of this is true? That's why I stayed, to find out. You preach self-exploration, or whatever it is you equate with being in the woods. Find your howl, you once told me. I'm here, trying to figure this out, trying to figure me out. So you dig up this book and come out here, and when things don't turn out, you fucking stay? That doesn't make any sense. I felt like I wasn't the same person. I couldn't go back to my old life with all this hanging over me. I tried to kill someone. It isn't easy to live with that. The waft of lemon and shortbread bloomed from the house and eased the mood. I'm not saying forget, but we can't drag this trauma around with us the rest of our life and let it color every experience we have. I didn't relate well to Charlie. Torment was our strongest bond. Snot ran down his face. In the wild, it's only about now. There is no then. But I'm not a possum, Alex. I have a memory. Being present isn't the same as ignoring the past. I pressed on with the book. Charlie listened, but I'm not sure he heard. A lemon square in his hand and another in his belly, he leaned back in the chair, looking up at the overripe banana sky and unsure what to believe. We were up on a hillside a few hours later. Zeke roamed around while we argued with baby gin blossoms and red cheeks. A waxing moon hung over Charlie's shoulder. I've been living backwards for too long. We need to let go, Charlie. Charlie hung his head between his knees. Zeke poked his ear with his tongue, and he swatted him away like a mosquito. I can't. I believe you're a good man. Thinking hatefully is one thing, but acting on it isn't something a good man could live with. I know I couldn't. If you hurt her, the agony will empty you out like a dead tree being slowly returned to the forest floor. Your loose ends will wilt. then your trunk, and finally your heart. Now I was the one crying. Finally. Tears streamed into the corner of my mouth, and the salty snap crinkled my tongue. My voice was on a desperate autopilot, while my mind showed me an image of Erin's sunken body at the bottom of the ocean. A knife was stuck in her heart. "You should have talked to me about this," Charlie said. "We could have worked through it together. I feel like you're trying to tell me you'd snitch." "I'm scared." This was the most honest thing I said to him. I was scared for everybody. My life had become quantum. I was both a wave and a particle, and I knew I couldn't exist as both. As soon as someone saw me for what I was, I'd be revealed to be one or the other. "I'm not promising tonight changed how I feel, but we need to stay on the same page. You need to be more open," Charlie said. He stood up and stretched. "If you agree to talk more, I will tell you if I have a change of heart." It wasn't the confirmation I hoped for, but it was enough to sleep that night. It was enough to keep me from looking over my shoulder. I closed my eyes, and John floated inside my eyelids. His starched shirt peppered with red dots, and his eyes opened. He was filled with rage. "I want to go home," Charlie said, snapping me out of the trance. Wave or particle, beam or dot, I'd soon find out which one I was.
With and Without You, page 233. It was early evening, maybe 5 o'clock on a crisp autumn night. I made room in my closet for sweaters I'd taken from storage earlier in the day. I went to John's apartment to talk. The nasty exchange on the carpet was a week old now. I loved him, and I wasn't ready to give up, though I didn't tell him that. All week I was horrible to him, threatened to call the police, threatened to leave, threatened to tell his friends. Empty threats, but they seemed to work. As long as it was a one-time thing, I thought I could deal with it, and the nastier I got, the more he groveled. He sent lavish gifts, no flowers or candy, a designer handbag, a watch, an incredible handmade Japanese knife with a jade handle. The more desperate his pleas for forgiveness, the happier I was. It was my turn. I deserved to make him pay, financially and emotionally. That night, he was done groveling. John was sunken into a worn club chair when I walked into the apartment, a glass of bourbon balanced on his chest and harlequin-socked feet up on the coffee table. There was a political debate show on TV. He loved to watch those shows where a liberal and a conservative pretended to be outraged by everything the other one says. The names are always stupid and confrontational, partisan strike or whatever. He didn't bother to look at me when I let myself in. I pulled up a stool to the kitchen bar and waited for him to speak, or at the very least look in my direction. Neither one of us liked the ambiguous turn our relationship had taken, but John seemed exhausted by it. He was sitting there inking his rubber stamp. "I'll finish this tonight, one way or another." When he did talk, he wasn't himself. It wasn't the booze or the pills. I just caught myself doing to him what the media did to me. It wasn't pills like that. They were prescribed. I'm still not sure what they were for. He was on an antidepressant and had something else for sleep. Like I said, he was very private. John didn't like me using his laptop to check the weather, let alone asking for the details of a prescription. There was a sadness in him that took hold sometimes, so I understood why he was in therapy, and I tried to understand when he would lash out. It's such a cliché. The overprivileged, overeducated overdog was clinically depressed. That didn't bother me. He was going to get better. He was sick. I did use it to excuse his behavior. I regret that. When someone is mentally ill, it's easy to dismiss everything they do. I felt terribly guilty when I dressed down his behavior, and even worse when I thought about leaving him because of it. I figured the social scientists would fix him eventually. That night when John spoke, he was flat and monotone, disconnected from the body his mind controlled. He struggled to turn his head and address me. He was overcome by a darkness so heavy he could barely move, and I think his plan that night was to escape the world that vexed him so. The gun was in his pocket. He wanted off this rock. There he was on the couch, sleeves rolled up, arms covered with bandages from where I scratched him, trying to loosen his grip so that I could breathe. And there I was in the kitchen, not a mark on me, my neck the same shade of ivory it had been my whole life. It doesn't matter how smart a good man is. He can do well even if he isn't bright. A bad man has to be smart to get anywhere or anyone. The more evil you are, the smarter you have to be. John was so evil that before the demonic swivel of his head, I never noticed how evil he was. Choking me hadn't left a trace. It's the perfect abuse. I didn't have to wrap my neck up in a scarf of shame or lie to my coworkers. That's really important. Not only were there no marks for others to see and prove what he'd done, but there weren't any marks for me to see either. When I got up the next day and looked in the mirror, I was whole, I thought. How many times do I have to say I am sorry before things can go back to normal? I am so tired of this. Being sorry for suffocating me wasn't good enough, I pressed him. You're sorry? I should have thrown you in fucking prison. He labored to stand up, slow, oafish. Stop threatening me, Erin. I've apologized and apologized. What I did was terrible, but it wasn't without cause. Tell me how to fix this. I stood. I sensed weakness in his desperation, so I went on the offensive. The thing about being manipulated is that it's hard to know what you wanted to do and what the manipulator made you do. I remember what I did that day, but I'll spend the rest of my life wondering whether they were my choices or John's. What kind of a man strangles a woman from behind? Are you too weak? I pushed him. Or too pathetic? I pushed him again. To see my face while you choked me. It felt good to stand up for myself, but that was short-lived. He ragdolled me into the wall. I felt the drywall buckle. I stared into the carpet sobbing, too afraid to look way, way up at him again. Enough, he told me. He took a handgun from his pocket. It was black and had a plastic grip. John once said I needed to know how to protect myself and learn how to shoot. I would never go to the range with him. Right then I wished I had. Even if I could get my hands on the gun and wanted to shoot him, I wasn't sure I'd know how. You don't take anything seriously. You don't understand that everything isn't a competition or some goddamn game. You can't win at a relationship. I'm going to make you understand. John, put the gun down. I'm not trying to be the best at making you feel bad. Actually, it is a game, Erin. You're right. Everything. He waved his arms around in circles. Is all one big game. John, I need you to put that gun down right now. Fine, is that how to fix this? He set the gun on the end table. I was still on the floor of the living room. There are winners and losers in life, Erin. Look how unhappy we are. Look what you make me and I make you. One of us has to lose so the other can win. John, I don't understand. I love you, but I don't understand. We were perfect, Erin. You were perfect and I was perfect. We ruined it together. I make you worse. You make me worse. The solution is simple. John, I spoke slowly, I'm going to put the gun away. You do whatever you have to, Erin. I know you're a winner. He let me take the gun off the table, but before I could stand up, he was on top of me again. This time the choke was much deeper. He let up just before I blacked out. You chicken shit, you've got a gun. Stop me. I tossed the gun an arm's length away and stared him down. I didn't want to hurt him. You keep getting worse. Look at what we do to each other. There's nothing left inside you. I've rotted it all away, he said, and stomped down the hall toward his bedroom. He came back with a silver revolver he kept in a hidden compartment under his bed. My face was purple. I was so tense my body was cutting off my own air supply. I could barely stand. I thought you were special, but you're like every bitch in love. Spineless, a follower. You were so good, why'd you have to go and start acting like me? I don't want a puppet, you stupid whore. You do exactly what I say when I say it. You aren't what I thought you were. Show me there's more to you than some lovesick devotee. Nothing he said made any sense. He'd gone mad. I clawed my way to the gun I'd thrown and put my back to the wall so it would be harder for him to get his arms around my neck. My knees were up and my hands were shaking. The gun bobbled up and down. You fucking loser, it's you or me. He unlocked the safety and walked at me with the barrel pointed at my chest. Choose, he said. Choose. He was a few feet from me. I pushed myself up to the wall. A hurricane of thoughts and feelings enveloped me, and I had no sense of right and wrong. No thoughts of good or bad. All I heard were his words. The weight of the universe was upon me, stifling everything but my ears. Choose! I pulled the trigger and kept pulling long after he was down, then collapsed so hard and fast I thought I'd never stand again. 27 minutes later, I stood up, and nothing was ever the same, and nothing was ever good, but I know I made the right choice.
Chapter 30, Day 987. Charlie left on Sunday almost as planned. He refused to let me drive him to the airport and elected for public transit instead. He didn't ask for directions to the train station. He was so eager to leave, he called a cab. He was all I thought about at work Monday. Distracted, my food came out wrong. Under, over, mixed up. My food was a reflection of my mind. Erin caught every mistake, and even though she was agitated by my carelessness, she still took the time to slide me a cup of revolting green tea and 2 aspirin, assuming the long weekend was what had me in a haze. "You guys sure know how to get after it," she said, turning the mug's handle towards me. It was the usual Monday at any job. The groove wasn't greased. The routine felt slightly unfamiliar. The handle of a pan was too wide, or the dial on a burner was more sensitive than I remembered. I managed to get through it without any grievous errors, and stayed late to close with Erin, with the hopes of taking her back to my place, or vice versa. I was starting to like my new life, and as fucked up as that was, I was starting to believe I could keep this up a while longer. The floor was wet with bleach, and my feet squeaked as I ran a rag over the can opener, the last device left to clean when Erin called me over from the bar. The tint on the front windows made the dining room extra dark when the main lights were off, but there was enough of a red hue from the exit sign above the bathroom hallway to navigate. Erin sat on top of the bar with Sputnik lamps exploding warm yellow light over each shoulder. My journal of recipes and semi-forgotten pains sat next to her, with her right hand on top of it. "You left this under Tommy's station on Friday. I thought you might want it." She jumped down. I searched her face for emotion. Did you read it?" It would be hard to find anything incriminating with a casual glance. It was a few pages of history, some conjecture, but most of it was about food. Ideas for stupid condiments like kimchi buffalo sauce and elaborate restaurant concepts, the laughable Essen ramen. These were the last things I thought about before the void. I stepped up to kiss her and got to the finish line when my world went dark. That last little bit where the girl stops before your faces come together to tell you no matter how this turns out, that you did this, that this was your fault. I palmed her lumbar and wafted her in. Erin got taller, back arching up to make herself a little easier to reach. I took in her kitchen stink, hair dusted with the sulfuric remnants of the grill vent she cleaned a few minutes prior. I focused on the dimple between her nose and lips, something I'd done since I first kissed Lindsay Atwater in 3rd grade. Aim for the middle, hit something. I saw her nose, closer. Bigger nose, closer. Blurry nose, black. My light went out. It's hard to be a cynic when you wake up bound and gagged in the dark and you know you deserve it. I wasn't thinking, what shit luck this is. Oh, woe is fucking me. Oh, cruel world. No. All I could think about was scratching my nose. I wormed forwards and back, trying to find a wall to rub my nose on. I wiggled my shirt up, and my flank scuffled along the icy floor. The chemical stench of tape drifted into my nostrils. I poked at the tape with my tongue, and it bowed out and rubber-banded back. My mouth wasn't the only part of me covered. The tape wound around my whole body. Trussed and ready for roasting. From spitter to shitter she tied me. Good girl, I thought. There's nothing worse than an itch you can't scratch. Love is an itch I can't scratch. I wondered how Erin did it. A big fuck-off knife hidden behind her back, maybe. She must have only worked up enough courage to whip me with the handle. I felt whole, not punctured. I hoped I didn't go out on the first whack. I hoped she had to bash me in the head so many times she was winded when I finally passed out. I tried to pry my lips open again. My aching tongue did nothing. The rattle and hum around me was something I felt more than heard. My right ear was taped, and it played loud slaps from my heart, while my left, pressed against the floor, echoed the vibrations from some nearby machine. The clues had me thinking I might be stuffed into an ice machine, or on a truck headed for the bottom of the ocean, or worse, Philadelphia. I wanted to scratch my nose as much as I wanted to know how she found me out. Like a children's mystery game, I turned the clues over in my mind. Was it the book under the nightstand in the bedroom, or the journal under the prep table in the kitchen? Or was it a conversation with her mother, where she tells her she's met a boy, and Mom scours the web with his name to see what she can dig up, to see if there are any red flags that might cause her cub to turn lioness again and participate in the hunt? I was hell-bent on getting the tape off my mouth, if not to scratch my nose, so I could bark out a few words of defense before she killed me. I jerked forward like a sledder trying to start down a hill and spun my body around in a circle until my feet hit something solid. I flutter-kicked the object to get a sense of its shape, then I scooted to it, set both heels as high as I could, and pressed. The metal clanked against the wall, and after a snap of silence, a thunderous rain of heavy melons, loose butternut squash, and bagged celery punched down on me. The crates of fruits and vegetables smashed into my ribs and calves. The tip shelf of the walk-in cooler laid across my face, and I slid my nose across the rough edge with great relief. I soothed my itch and loosened the tape on its frame. I couldn't move, but now I could talk. The hum was the fan on the refrigeration unit, and I knew by the direction of the sound that the cooler door was behind my head. When it opened, I'd have a chance to speak. I'd be awfully hard to stab, covered in cantaloupes and squash. The next light I saw wasn't going to mean salvation. It meant judgment. I pleaded to the dark that when she came, she'd give me time to speak, to say as impossible as it was, as stupid and nonsensical, that I loved her, that I'd be happy with those last words. I accepted my fate and accepted the pressure of the fallen produce as the last hug I'd ever receive, when a quivered voice came from over there in the black. "Alex," she said. I thought it was a hallucination. I held my breath and was still. The numb from the cold began to spread. "Please don't hurt me. Please, talk to me. I hear you breathing. Alex." "Say something," Erin said. "Anything." Chapter 31. Stalks of celery cracked behind me when I jerked my head off the cold floor. The notches and bumps on the ground designed to prevent a fall tore and pricked at my back. The cold hurt. I didn't know if I was bleeding or if the temperature was working its way inside me. Erin stabbed away with her voice in the night, but I couldn't answer. I tried to see her, squint hard enough to get an outline of her body and what weapon she might be holding. I don't know how long we sat there, seconds, hours, days. The dark makes everything feel like forever. It's an aching fight for light and certainty. Erin kept calling my name as if she were sorry. "I'm here," I said. "Are you going to hurt me?" she asked. "Why would I hurt you?" I heard shuffles and jerks. "So how did you figure it out? The journal?" I asked. Erin cried deep, buckled sobs. "I know I deserve this, Alex, but help me understand." "Deserve what?" "Judgment." Smashed and bound was the best way to hear this news. Her cries now made me feel better instead of worse. She thought she was beating me to the punch, that I was the bad guy. It was going to be hard to argue with what she'd read. "It's the other way around," I said, anger building in my voice. "How dare you, after all you've done to me, like I wasn't broken enough already." It went silent for a long spell. I imagined she was sitting in the corner with her back against the wall and a paring knife in her hand. Nothing too fancy. She wanted to be as close as possible when she carved me up. She was waiting for me to say something awful enough to motivate her to finish the job. I tried to stop loving her. I tried to say something hateful so she could get it over with, but the words didn't come. If she's beautiful and charming, I can't help but fall in love. Get to know any one of these creatures long enough, and you'll see her beauty and her charm. "Is it hard to kill someone?" I asked. "It's easy right until the moment that you do it." She fought to regain composure. "A while back someone came to hurt me. I knew this day would come, but not you. Why you?" I thought she was going to kill me right then. Erin seized and hissed. Words weren't coming out of her mouth, only fitful chirps. After her body tired and I could understand what she was saying, I couldn't make any sense of it. "This can't be real. What kind of demented fuck are you?" She called me names, screamed, shivered, And she kept yelling, "Turn on the fucking lights!" over and over, over and over, screaming. I never felt closer to anyone. She was insane, and it felt so good to hear someone hurt the way I had. I knew it would be over soon. "Erin," I said. "Erin." She stopped convulsing. "I'm ready." "Fine, Alex. If that's even your name, don't tell me anything. Make it quick, you piece of shit. It's the least you can do." "I know this is overwhelming, but I'm the one who's tied up." This is when I should have figured it out. Erin had the body of an outback ostrich. She couldn't have drugged me into the cooler. She sucked up air. "Fuck you." I kicked at the melons and the squash. "You don't remember doing that?" "Alex, you did this." Just like the kiss, I did this. It was the only thing she said that made sense. The fan shut off. The silence got louder. The dark got darker. I got more confused. "I don't know how we got here," she said. "I do. You killed my best friend." She stammered like it was information she was unable to process. The fan kicked on and off 3 times before she spoke again. "I'm sorry. I loved him so much." She sobbed for a long time, and I sat there wondering if she was too crazed to kill me now, like she'd forgotten what we were doing there. Erin took deep, painful gasps that I could hear as if she were inside my head. Tears ran down the side of her face and pinged off the ground. The way she fought to take in air, I could hear her will to live wane. Some embedded code in her DNA squeezed her lungs and diaphragm, so she got just enough air to stay alive, even though she didn't want to. I languished in her grief. I became it. I didn't know what hurt was. I was unprepared to hear a living soul be torn apart. I began to cry with her, another instrument in the orchestra of misery and sickness and agony and every single horrible feeling a person can have and still be alive. "I killed your friend. I didn't want to. He made me. God, I wish I could see you while I say this. I killed him. If you think hurting me will right that, then do your worst. But I didn't pretend to care about you the way you did me. It was real for me, and if this was just some game so you could tear me apart, then get it over with, you fucking asshole. I'm tired of suffering." I was starting to think I wasn't the only one tied up. "Why the fuck would I hurt you? I love you." I romped my body up and down like a worm. "Also, it would be really hard to hurt you covered in 1,000 feet of duct tape and a truckload of produce." "I don't believe you," she said. "You don't believe that I'm tied up, or you don't believe that I love you?" "Both. You tied me up." I jiggled up and down again so she could hear the bolts on the shelf squeak and pop. "I knocked over one of the shelves. It's on top of me." "Did it hurt you?" "Yes." "Good." "As for the other thing, I love you. That one's harder to prove from here." "Stop saying that. We don't love each other. You're evil." "I love you." "Stop it. I fucking hate you." She screamed, and I screamed over her. Spit flew from my mouth, and my voice strained and cracked. When we were finished, we both heaved. "I love you. There aren't any other words. I love you, and I'm sorry that I love you, and I'm sorry life has taken a cataclysmic shit on you, and I am the sun it revolves around. I wanted peace, and I found it in you. We can go to hell together, hand in hand, but first we have to get out of here." I pushed my head back to crack as many of the stalks of celery as I could out of frustration. "What's the last thing you remember?" Erin asked. "You jumped down from the bar, and I went to kiss you. The last thing I remember was a scream, a shriek, and then it was like a giant wave crashed on me." "Was it Mike?" "He would never hurt me. He isn't a piece of shit like you." "What do you know about him?" "I think it's fishy he was stationed outside of Richmond at Fort Lee." "So why again would he hurt me?" Although I'd have said the same thing of you. She was hyperventilating, but calm, considering what a disaster this was. Flight had overtaken fight. I wasn't scared so much as I was heartbroken. "I'd never hurt you." "Isn't that why you're here?" I was here for the truth. I know you're not a monster. But you are. I wish that I wasn't, I said. There isn't anyone who hates us both enough to do this. That's not true. Who, then? Chef Jamie. The cooler door jerked open, and a flash of light shot through the doorway. Eyes unable to focus, a dark figure kicked carrots up towards my head and batted away the flood of avocados around Erin's feet. He grabbed the last 2 rungs of tape between her legs and dragged her out. Her yelp echoed against the cold, and her lagging head smashed the door frame when her body turned the corner, like a truck trailer on a wide right turn. The heavy door recoiled back with a slam that stole the light from inside the cooler. The warm air outside passed through the grates, into the shelf, and onto the end of my nose, making it itch again. The fan kicked on, and I was cold before the temperature had the time to drop. Chapter 32. The faint smack of unrolled duct tape reverberated through the cooler door right before it opened. The lever stuck and chirped a few times. Then the latch broke free. A heavy, breathing shadow stood over me, his shoulders bobbing up and down. The head was still and loomed as my eyes processed the waves of new light surrounding it. Imagine my surprise, Charlie said. He swam leeks and potatoes from around my body with cupped hands. I'm sitting across the street at the bakery this morning, enjoying a cup of coffee and doing some light reading, and who walks out the front door of this restaurant? At least I'd gotten him to read. Her book was the first recommendation of mine he'd ever taken. Charlie pulled up the steel shelf off of me and slammed it back into position. It bounced off the wall and back into his hands. He shoved it 3 or 8 times, each one harder than the last. You did, my friend, with an apron around your waist. I didn't respond. Charlie said not to taunt a hungry beast. Forest memes were a guiding light to save me from the shaved animal above. Charlie hiked a sweet potato behind him. I changed seats to get an angle on what you're doing. He ripped the celery out from behind my head, and the back of my skull cracked against the metal floor. I was excited. Charlie's voice oscillated. I expected you to shed your costume all slow and cool, like a movie assassin. I expected you to get in your car and drive off with the mission complete. I expected to hear sirens in the distance. I waited and waited, thinking any moment they'd sound. He twisted me around and drug half my body into the hallway by my ankles. Charlie stuffed them under his armpits and charged down the hall, the backs of his legs taut as steel cables with each powerful step. I thought you did it to protect me, like you had a plan and all the lies were to cover your ass. I moved back to my seat and decided to wait it out. I wanted to see the stretcher and where the red spot was on the white sheet they covered her body with. Imagine my fucking surprise, he said, disgusted. I'd gone into work extra early to try and smooth things over with Erin after the turbulent weekend. I met her outside to show her some affection before the rest of the staff arrived and I became another one of her minions. Charlie talked while he towed me into the bar. You wander back into the frame, and you're holding hands like kids at the movies with the girl who killed your best friend, and you look happy about it. Charlie, stop. He ignored me. You tricky bastard, I was thinking. Then I figured I'd see gun muzzle flashes through the window. I was grinning so hard it hurt. He drugged me into the bar where all the tables had been shoved into the corner. Erin was strapped to a chair facing the empty seat my ass was destined for. Her mouth was covered in green duct tape and her hands were bound behind her back. I waited half the day. I gave you all the chances. But when people went in to eat, I started to wonder. Charlie rolled me onto my face and flicked each row of duct tape open with a pocket knife. He held the blade sideways against the back of my neck. Get in the chair, he said. All right, kids. I think we could use a drink. Charlie rifled through the bar cabinets, tossing glassware and bottles he didn't want onto the floor. He straightened up with a good idea and pulled a wad of zip ties from his back pocket. Then he leapt to me with 3 soft strides and glared with an open-mouthed smile. Remember these? He bound my hands. The final clicks locked the ties so tight my fingers went numb. No way out. My mouth wasn't covered, but I was afraid to speak, too scared Charlie's reaction would be swift and violent. Erin was more relaxed, a seasoned professional at attending a Holocaust. Charlie popped a spout out of a cheap bottle of American bourbon and cast it aside. He put 3 glasses in a line and slopped half a glass of drink into each one. He whipped his down, and walked towards me, napkin underneath the cup like I'd paid for it. "Oh, that's right. You don't like whiskey," he said, pouring it over my head. The empty glass shattered against the brick wall in a violent snap. Charlie threw it inches above Erin's head, but her eyes stayed locked with mine. I blinked to squeeze the sting from my eyes. Morse code to Erin. We are fucked. Charlie sauntered the 3rd drink over to Erin and tore the tape off her mouth. I tightened my lips at her. Don't speak. We hadn't been together long enough to use glances like commands. That's when you know you're actually in love, when you can tell someone exactly what to do with your eyes. We weren't there, but she seemed to understand what my expression meant. Charlie tipped the glass up to her lips, and she sucked it up without comment. When Charlie set the glass on the floor, she spit the booze on the crown of his head. Charlie stayed calm. "I read you like games." He dabbed himself with bar napkins. "How about truth or dare? Let's get silly." "The game will end when someone dies. Could be you." He motioned at me with his knife. "Could be you. Could be both of you. It's really up to you guys." I shook with panic. Charlie's voice took on the happy snark of a daytime game show host full of amphetamines. "1 question per turn, or there will be a penalty." He tossed his pocket knife into the space between us and jumped around the room with frantic points and pivots. "How's it feel, Alex?" Erin said. "To be betrayed by someone you care about." Her voice was tight and scolding. I shook more. "Tisk tisk! Only speak when spoken to, or there will be a penalty." Charlie tossed the microplaner and a bunch of other tools from behind the bar between us. He danced over to Erin by the beat of his own madness, and open hand slapped her with such force her chair fell over. I surged and grunted. My chair moved an inch, maybe less. "If you lie, or I think you're lying, guess what?" He yelled from the kitchen and ran back with his arms full of metal. Kitchen shears, a cleaver, a cast iron pan, and more went into his pile of torment. "The game ends when I kill someone, or you dare me to kill someone." I don't know about you guys, but I feel great. Simple games can be very therapeutic. Charlie grabbed a bar stool and sat between us, forming a golden triangle. Erin and my eyes the distinct side, Charlie's the duplicated when he looked at either one of us. "May the truth set you free." "Charlie, listen to me," I said. He rushed me, turtled me backwards, and closed my throat with his forearm. "This is the last time I tell you, speak only when spoken to." He picked up a large cast iron pan and flipped it long ways, like the head of a hatchet, and smashed my chest with the rim. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My heart was already broken. Now the rest of my chest was too. He got up and tugged at his collar to get back level. "Pretty Miss Erin," he began, "do you know why you're here?" I was still on my back, looking up at the ceiling and choking. I hoped she'd asked him to kill me. "Yes, I killed your friend," she said with a face of stone. "Wow. Do you know who this man across from you is? Not what he told you, because he's a fucking liar, but who he really is?" "Yes, he was John's best friend." The certainty in her voice, that John had a best friend and not best friends, packed Charlie with more potential energy. "Really? How interesting. Let's move on to Alex." "Stop this," I interrupted. His mouth buzzed and he kicked around the pile to find a tool for my punishment. He took up a metal Spätzle machine that looked like a cheese grater and raked the spiked side across the top of my arm. It sliced in perfect corporate farmed rows until my skin pinched and forced Charlie to jerk it through at the edge. The wound wasn't deep. Thin lines of blood came to the surface, which made my arm look like a red window screen. He set my chair upright. "Now, Alex," Charlie said like he'd finished doing the dishes. "How long has this shit been going on?" Charlie's index finger wagged between our heads. "Eeny, meeny, miny." "I've worked here a few weeks, but if you mean us, it hasn't been long," I replied. Charlie looked over to Erin for disapproval, a head swivel so we could scrape more flesh off my body. "And how long have you been in California?" "Almost a year." And why did you come here? To kill Erin Rhodes. Did you try? I figured we were dead, but this is the one thing I didn't want her to hear. Yes. When? Right after I arrived, I hid in the back of her car and tried to strangle her with a plastic tie like the one you put around my hands. Erin's face went from stone to salt. She would have collapsed, but the tape held her up. And what happened? I tried to kill the person who got in the car, but it wasn't her. Do you know who it was? Yes, it was her sister. Erin's lips became violent. Charlie golf-clapped his hands together and yipped, the proud host he was to our pain. Every new detail didn't enrage him. It excited him, affirmed what he was doing was right. He paraded around on a track of confirmation bias surrounding a lake of weaponry. Wonderful. I wish she could be here too. Don't you, Erin? Charlie raised up his eyebrows, daring her to act out of turn. She squirmed, feet clacking on the concrete. Isn't this fun? He squealed. Then what, Alex? I was crushed, lost. I gave up my life, taught myself how to cook. I wanted to get to know Erin and make sure all the assumptions I had about what happened to John were true. Charlie cut in. And if they were, then I was going to kill her. But that wasn't the answer. This isn't the answer. Do you still want to kill her? No, and I don't want to kill you either. He turned his head back towards Erin, giddy. Back to you, little girl. Do you know who he was when you hired him? Charlie made deranged faces with his mouth after he spoke. No. All emotion had left her voice. But you know now. Yes, Alex told me while we were locked up. Did John ever talk about Alex? By first name, dumb college stuff. He wasn't big on sharing. Erin said, and Charlie jumped in. Did he talk about me? Not that I remember. It's hard to remember stories about people you've never met. Charlie deflated. Alex sure has been bad. Do you want me to hurt him? No. I want to hurt him. She pointed her face at me. You motherfucking... Bzzz, went Charlie's mouth. Speaking to Alex out of turn is against the rules, Charlie said with a meat tenderizer in his hand. He straddled the chair, and her body disappeared. All I could see was his mauling back. Charlie pressed the soft palm of her left hand onto the chair's arm and hammered each of her knuckles in succession. Erin sucked up the first two swings with grunts, but howled when he shattered her ring and pinky fingers. Each one popped straight and pointed at me when its knuckle was struck. Catch your breath, sweetheart. Alex's turn. Chapter 33. Truth or dare? Charlie asked like I had a choice. He was on a bar stool with a glass held to his temple. Truth, I said. I can ask either of you a question, right? Sure, what the hell? I focused on Erin's gnarled fingers. Charlie, was John a stable guy, mentally? I gave Erin the nod to continue what I started. Sure, he was medicated. I know he was depressed and shit, but that was just part of his family having money and sending their oddball kid to the doctor. Normal people call that sad. It happens. My turn, Erin said. Did you ever see him hurt someone else, or himself? Charlie mechanically turned towards Erin. No, which is why your self-defense argument is bullshit. He's the only guy I've ever known that's never been in a fight. He talked about killing himself all the time, I said. What about the parking garage? Once we were old enough to go out to the bars, John insisted on being designated driver because he said the rest of us lacked self-control. He'd wheel a car stacked with guys up to the top of the parking garage on 2nd Street, even if there were empty spaces below, so we could get up on the concrete ledge and tightrope walk to the stairway. Every time he did it, he had a new question or comment about self-destruction. I'll race you to the bottom. What's more important than finding out if we're infinite? Would you miss me? Those were fucking jokes, Alex, Charlie said, irritated. You know they weren't. Bzzzt. He's been committed at least twice. Bzzzt. He sleep for days at a time. Bzzzt. All those pills, all those guns. Charlie flashed on top of me, buried my face in his chest, and squeezed until I was silent. The force rang my ears, and everything turned into a blur. He pounded my head with overhand chops. My nose split. One of my eyes swelled shut. Teeth cracked and splintered. Exhausted, he picked up a paring knife from the floor and held the tip to my good eye. "Why can't you see?" he repeated until his throat got tired of saying it. "My turn." He sat down, sweat peeking through the front of his shirt. "Do you love me? Are you my brother?" "This has to end," I said. "Do you love her?" "I do. I know it's fucking absurd, and I love them all. I won't tell you to hurt her. Not now, not ever. Take my head, carve my fucking heart from my chest, and feed it to the wolves. Do your worst. Put it all on me, Charlie, but leave her out of it. Never has a person so undeserving suffered so much." I sunk my head. "Truth or dare, Alex? I dare you to kill me." Charlie paused. Thought. "Like a man, look me in the eyes as you do it." "Fine," he said. Charlie scuffled to the kitchen pass and grabbed my knife satchel from the window. He pulled on the swoop knot, unfurled it to his stumpy feet. The boning knife fell out as Charlie eased them down lovingly to the ground. He stood over the long row and slid the handles in and out. He stopped at the meteorite blade, captivated by the golden lines refracted from the yellow Edison bulbs above. "We've grieved together, and now I'll do it alone," he said, eyes to the floor. Charlie bound up, knife turned over in his hand like a javelin, and sprinted towards me. Tears welled. Erin screamed, "Wait! Let me do it! Wait!" Charlie veered off course and stopped himself by running into the bar. I was relieved. "Let me do it," she said. "Please. I deserve it." Charlie snarled and cut the tape from her hand. He handed Erin his pocket knife and kept the big knife to himself, just in case. Erin concentrated on Charlie as they stalked towards me. I closed my good eye. I was ready. "You're next," he said to her. "Consider this a consolation prize." "Fast or slow?" she said to him. The echo of steps moved towards me. 1, 2. I waited and waited. When it didn't hurt, I peeked. Charlie was falling towards me. 1. His mouth was as wide as the chasm between us. 2. The farther down he went, the more of Erin was revealed in the background. 3. His face hit the ground, and the knife she'd stuck into the side of his neck wavered left and right, like a planted flag in the coastal wind. "Is that self-defense enough for you?" Erin clenched her teeth and tried not to cry. It's hard to see someone for what they are when you love them. "Cut me free," I said. "Or cut me, or I don't care anymore." She took a pull from the bottle of bourbon on the bar, then stood with a foot on either side of Charlie's twitching head. Erin ducked around and cut into my wrist to get underneath the tight plastic band. Her nose was smeared with my blood when she called the police, leaving me to unbind my legs myself. She offered her undamaged hand to pull me up, and once I was on my feet, she knocked me back on my ass with a heavy punch to my already broken nose. "That's for Emily," she said and collapsed down the wall. Sirens rang in the distance. Red and blue lights screamed towards us that looked like they were flashing, but were really an illusion, a circular peekaboo. We stood hand in bloody hand outside the front door and waited for them to arrive. There was a fresh graffiti tag, end to end, scrawled across the front windows of the restaurant. It sang in neon green, popped in cerulean, and had a black drop shadow to accentuate the message. "Cunts cook here," it said, with a glitter golden arrow pointed at the front door and the two of us. Chapter 34. Mike and Emily sat between us at the police station, on a plastic row of chairs in the quiet bowels next to the coffee machine. I was handcuffed to the arm and couldn't see very well out of my swollen face. We'd been there a few hours. Erin and I were questioned together at first, then separated after I casually dropped into the conversation that at a certain point in the timeline I intended to kill her. Briefly, I qualified, but it didn't help. She rubbed my knee as I said it, then slapped my bandaged nose. From then on, they questioned us separately. Mike sat next to me to fend off Emily's savage swipes. The fact that I put her sister in danger was enough to send her into a frenzy. Thankfully, I didn't hear Erin mention the car. She kept telling me to go fuck myself, wearing purple pajamas covered in kittens. It was adorable. "Chill, Em," Mike said. "We can't go anywhere. They're going to handcuff you if you don't settle down." I pulled my arm towards Mike to give him a fist bump, but the forgotten shackles snatched it back to the chair. "Erin, how are you not more upset?" she said to her big sister. "I knew." "What?" Emily gasped. "I knew this was coming. Some part of you had to know too. You can't kill someone and live happily ever after," Erin said with diverted eyes, traumatized. Polished black shoes struck the tiles in double clacks that kept me on edge. "If you really did care about me, Alex, then I'm sure this was hell for you too. It says something about you that you weren't capable of hurting anyone. Not the way I am, at least." The bill acceptor on the coffee machine didn't read very well, and each officer and clerk had a different trick for crisping the bill. Crease it long ways, iron it with your palm on the side of the machine, whatever. A tall brunette in a pantsuit threw her hands up in disgust when her dollar was spit back a third time. She looked down at me, covered in gauze and blood, and went back to her work with a smile and a new perspective on what a bad day really looked like. Erin and I dribbled bits of the night back and forth to Emily and Mike. We sat there for hours. Mike went home to rest once the sun was up, but Emily refused to leave her sister, even though I was basically under arrest. She finally left in the afternoon, after Erin told her that I tried to sacrifice myself for her. She said I was still a piece of shit before she left. She was right. Knees bent, Erin whisked around one of the empty office chairs, and then another, until she was next to me. She fought a wavy knot of hair off her colorless cheeks. "I'm sorry about your friend," she said. "Me too." I tried to set my head on hers, but my neck no longer worked. "The thing about tragedy is it either defines you or it reveals you," she sighed. "I saw what you are, Alex. You did too. Don't lose that. Carry it wherever you go from here." It was the nicest way to say we weren't putting this puzzle back together, that our time was up. The hourglass didn't run out of sand. The sand turned to storm. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" "For showing me a new way to live. Everything in the world isn't quantifiable or even rational. You've gone through so much, and yet you're happy. You choose to be happy. You embrace the joy of right now. It's inspiring." I thought how stupid that sounded, like some live-in-the-now self-help crap. At least it's crap until you understand how tentative existence is, and how almost every moment of every day is either a reaction to something that happened back there, or a step in a future direction. Erin got up and stretched her arms straight overhead. The double joints in her elbows caved in, and her forearms bent out. "Do you know what this is?" She held her tattooed forearm out in front of me. "No." "It's a triskelion, an ancient symbol. People have given it all sorts of different meanings, some related to sacred geometry or even cosmology, but to me it's a symbol of change, past, present, future. The whole universe is in constant flux. Even right now we're decaying. Soon all those little microbes that I'm a host to are going to consume me. I don't have time for hate, or resentment, or bitterness. I hope whatever tomorrow brings, you decide to not have time for it either. I don't think I'm that strong. Past, present, future. These things will always be a part of you, but you choose if they define you. Choose wisely." An officer that looked like he did a lot of push-ups took Erin away for more questioning or medical treatment or who knows what, and my California dream came to an end. It was time to go home. Home was an itch I couldn't scratch. I called over to her as she was escorted down the hall. "I won't hate you if you write this down." She disappeared around the corner forever. Chapter 35, Day 1597. I didn't see Erin after that. I tucked my tail and went back to Chicago, where I did my best to water my dead roots and make a new life. I couldn't get comfortable in my old ways. The ordinary jobs felt like itchy wool sweaters after losing a bunch of weight. It was easy to find work, but I couldn't keep it. My mind wasn't the same. When I integrated and did digital stress tests on medical parts, I didn't see the teardrop outline of the inlet shoe. I saw a sweet potato. The tubing was soba noodles. The buttons, sliced baguette. Calculation was no longer satisfying. Iteration was the enemy of imagination. I moved from job to job, socking away each little signing bonus. They welcomed me to the team at Crane Pharmaceutical with a video series narrated by a former child star. The RGL group was contracted by the steel mill. Their offices were converted mobile homes stuck between a sludge factory and an oil refinery. The hiring manager at the metal parts fabricator told me that my predecessor had died in his office. This office? I was already dead. Before the stash of money was half of what I hoped, I quit my last real job and rented a shoot in a strip mall on the northern shore. The best part about being back in Chicago is that I had a spiderweb connection to every type of guy. A drywall guy, a tire guy, a bushy blonde lady who wore crystals around her neck and walked my dog during the day. I didn't have any friends, but I had a lot of guys. I covered the paint-splattered floor with cheap brown tile, got some used kitchen equipment at an auction, and paid a neighborhood kid with stained fingers who swore he didn't tag my dumpster to paint a mural on the exposed brick walls. The lettering waved and contorted. It looked like abstract art, Jackson Pollock before the drip phase, a bunch of liquid shapes. If I turned my head at the right angle and relaxed my eyes like looking at a stereoscopic drawing, I could see it. Cunts cook here. The space was so narrow that there wasn't room for tables. Stools ran along a butcher block counter the length of the open kitchen and stopped at the door to the only bathroom. The days were long and hot, but I lived my $1 million dream minus the $1 million. I served eggs on the flat top all day, any way you like it. I invented strange sandwiches for every palate, like kimchi buffalo chicken and veal schnitzel caprese. People liked some of my ideas and balked at others, but it didn't discourage me. No reviewer was going to walk in, lick his pen, and critique what was little more than a food truck with a roof. The item that kept them coming back was the one I'd had the most trouble selling initially, Essen ramen. I suggested it as a morning warmer. It's got an egg on top. Or as a standalone lunch, and they'd say to me, that doesn't sound like ramen. I spent more than half of each day's prep on an item that never sold. I didn't give up because it was the one thing that I was most proud of. When the dashi went bad, it looked like mop water swirling down the drain. I needed to make that soup every day. I needed to be reminded of the time I found out hell was a real place and my mind could take me there any time I'd let it. And I'd think about Erin and how heaven was real too, as long as you cared about something more than you cared about yourself. Over time, I got more customers, and a few people gave it a try. There was never a line out the door, but the seats had butts in them most of the time. Occasionally, I'd get a walkout. A hip girl with white wireless earbuds might wave me off when she saw there were no seats. It felt good to make something. I didn't make much money, and nobody called my job frying eggs interesting, but I was happy. Happiness is shaking the water out of a basket of noodles and flipping it into a bowl of hot broth, then watching your customer look both ways before they tip the bowl up to their face. On a cold day in March, the sleet folded itself into ice on the sidewalk. A frozen puff pastry film only let half my shoes grip the ground on the way to work. Each step was a tiny slide forwards and back. It was a weekday, and I spent that morning trying to hide shrimp paste and hollandaise. Then I remembered how common shellfish allergies were. Lunch was the usual roll and bounce from the griddle to the stools. I cooked so close to the diners that I could have a conversation over the background chatter of sizzling meat. The doorbell buzzed to let me know someone was coming, and I felt the hard suck of heat rush out behind me to escape to one of the much better restaurants that surrounded me. I was too busy at the griddle toasting buns for sandwiches to turn and greet my new customer. I wore a stained apron and a goofy white torque that one of my regulars gave me as a joke. When I turned around, the front door was falling closed, and up on the shelf between the counter and the kitchen was my black satchel of knives, not tied with my shoelace swoop, but with a nice knot, a thoughtful knot. I wondered how long she sat outside and looked through the window. How long had she seen my shadow moving through the frosted glass? How many times had she tried to pull on the handle of the front door? But most of all, I wondered if she was going to try the soup. Chapter 36. Half of 72. 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144, 233, 377, 610, 987, 1597, to infinity. Afterward. What should we do if she gets off? That was the group text message that started this novel. The she was Shayna Hubers, the woman who married our friend, Ryan, in his Kentucky home. She shot him in the dining room while he was trying to end their relationship. Google it if you want. It's horrific. The responses varied, but as you can imagine, nobody had anything nice to say about the girl who murdered our friend. Fortunately, there was never any doubt she'd be convicted. Shayna was never granted bail and has been in custody for years, but it got me thinking. Ryan was as sweet and genuine a man as any I've ever known, but what if he wasn't? What if the circumstances were different, murkier? I wondered if we would still be so eager for vengeance, if reason would conquer our own tribal instinct to protect one of our own. I'd like to make it very clear that this novel in no way corresponds to the real-life tragedy I've mentioned above. The only meaningful way that nightmare influenced this story is that I witnessed and felt the horrors that follow such a terrible, violent act. It was a simple idea for a revenge story, and I'd been looking for something I thought was manageable. I made earlier attempts at writing, but I didn't have the skill to execute the complex narratives I imagined. The problem, I've come to learn, is that a book never ends up being about what you intend, nor does the story happen the way you planned. The human subconscious is fascinating. It has a way of injecting itself into all of your creative endeavors and coloring your work without authorization. This novel is a mere 80,000 words, but I wrote over 300,000 figuring out what the hell I was trying to say. Part of that was learning how to write decent long-form fiction, and the other was my idiotic refusal to accept that I wasn't in control of the tonal and contextual swerves the story was taking. I was supposed to be the captain of this ship. I'll let you decide what this thing is really about, but it sure as hell isn't about revenge. Thank you to Amanda and Stephanie, Nasima, Erin, Sarah, Ken, and all the other beta readers who suffered this thing in progress and helped me navigate the sea I'd longed for but never sailed. There was a point last year when I was lost. I had tons of words but no story. Writers have this saying, kill your darlings. It means delete whatever words get in the way of your story, no matter how clever or beautiful the prose. I had to kill about 240,000 darlings. All the writing blogs in the world weren't going to solve a problem like that. Drastic steps had to be taken. My solution was pretty unconventional, maybe even crazy. I decided to solve it the way Alex would, engineer it. I combined sequences and geometry and art to weave all the numbers in this book together to a physical storyboard painting thing. Every number in the book is a narrative marker of sorts, and I had a lot of fun plotting them all out. It's weird, but I'm weird. It was cathartic and reinvigorated me with the energy to finish this and get it out into the world. I'm not suggesting this is some new paradigm for storytelling. I'll never do this again. But it was something absurd I invented to help me get through the difficult process of telling the story this novel desperately wanted to tell, because it had no interest in telling the story I wanted to tell. There's numerical synchronicity everywhere, some of it intentional, but a lot of it accidental. The main character stories are told through overlapping Fibonacci spirals, but with very different axes. I chose this sequence for a lot of reasons, but above all because it's connected to the growth patterns of almost every living thing on this planet. In some weird way, it's part of the spell that conjured us up out of the primordial ooze. Bringing a novel into this world, even a silly one filled with cat shit and used tampons, is transformative, so in that way it's fitting too. I know this thing was marketed as a psychological thriller, but I see it as a journey out of psychopathy rather than into one. Something tells me we won't find this section in the bookstore anytime soon, so maybe Alex begins as the singularity, a finite point where the rules don't apply, deep in a hole, and spirals out. Maybe. Or maybe I needed a gimmick to compensate for a lack of storytelling skills. You tell me. I thought about including the art I made for the narrative or posting it on my website, but I think that would ruin the fun. If you take an honest crack at it and post it somewhere for me to see, I'll gladly send you a nice print of the original piece. First person to blow me away, and I'll send them the real thing. I can always make another. Your support means the world to me. If you've enjoyed this book, please help me share it with others. Give it a shout on social media, or write a review, or tell someone about it. The world of independent book marketing can be an insincere quagmire of spam and deception and pay for play. I truly need your help. Books are strange commodities because the author doesn't sell you their book. Other people do. We are all going to die, but we're not all going to live. Writing this novel fulfilled a lifelong dream. I shut down the business I spent 10 years building to pursue storytelling, and there's a good chance I'll fail. If I end up pounding away at the spreadsheets again, I won't be bitter. I lived. I tried. And I died. But I'm going to do that anyways. Much love and happiness and joy to all of you, even if you write a bad review. I'm Mike Wehner. Thank you for listening.
The end. I'm the author Mike Wehner. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to this book and supporting me and helping me make it a success. It's my first book, my debut novel, so I'm excited and elated and terrified all at the same time. There will be more to come. If you want to find out what I'm up to, please go to my website, www.mikewehner.com. That's Wehner. I'm more than just an author. I'm also an illustrator and an artist and a podcaster, so all that information can be found there. Thank you again, and I hope you loved it. Take care, everybody. You made it all the way to the end. Thank you so much. I hope you had a good time. I hope you enjoyed the book. If you did, please support me. The best way to support me is to buy the book. Links below, or just tell someone about it. That doesn't cost you anything. Give me a shout on social media, or tell a friend about the video, or link them to the book, or leave a review on Goodreads. Add it to your Goodreads, and share a candid experience, what you thought of it. I would really appreciate it, and I hope to bring you more good books soon. Have a great day.